Calling to order the meeting of the Committee on Finance. The time is 10:05 on Monday, September 16th, 2019. You should have in front of you the minutes per Rule 45 of the July meeting. Does anyone have any changes or questions about the Rule 45 minutes? Are we all set up there? Let me borrow yours. All right. Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Calling to order this meeting of the Committee on Finance. The time is 10:05 on Monday, September 16, 2019. You should have in front of you the minutes per Rule 45 of the July Committee on Finance meeting. Does anyone have any changes or questions about those? May I have a motion for approval? Oh, wait, Alderman Dowell. Moved by Alderman Dowell. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. First up today, we have the appointment of Ms. Reshma Soni as City Comptroller. Ms. Soni's career with the city is extensive, and you should have her CV in front of you at the moment. She's going to join us to answer any questions and provide information and where she would like to move this office forward. So, Ms. Soni, I think what I'll have you do is if you want to just give us a little bit of background, and then we'll take some questions from our aldermanic colleagues.
Thank you. Sure. Reshma Soni, Acting Comptroller. Good morning, Chairman Wagsback, Vice Chairman Hairston, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you as you consider my nomination as Comptroller for the City of Chicago. I also want to thank Mayor Lightfoot for allowing me the honor and privilege for continuing to serve the residents of Chicago in this important role. My career with the City of Chicago started in December of 2009. Since then, I've held various leadership roles in the Department of Finance, Office of Budget and Management, and in the Department of Aviation, as well as serving in the role of Comptroller at Cook County. My goals in these roles have been to improve financial performance and efficiencies while working to ensure that all services are provided equitably and with the needs of our citizens in mind. In my most recent role as Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Aviation, I was involved in the O'Hare International Airport use and lease negotiations, including negotiations of rates and charges and implementation of financial and space use protocols, as well as developing financial tracking of the $8.5 billion of the O'Hare Terminal Area Plan that this board had approved and capital improvement plan to modernize the airport, one of the largest airport capital programs in the country. With the help of my team and the use of technology, we also implemented an e-billing system that allows for interactive self-billing of activities by the airlines. Thank you. No problem. Thank you. And concessionaires, as well as statistics reporting, thus modernizing the reporting and revenue collections process for the airport. As First Deputy Budget Director in the Office of Budget and Management, and as Managing Deputy Comptroller over Accounting and Financial Reporting in the Department of Finance, I gained significant understanding of the city's budget processes and operations, while focusing on financial performance and optimizing productivity. In OBM, we implemented monthly monitoring of departmental spend to identify budget savings throughout the year and properly budget expenditures in the following year. And in finance, we created review processes and stronger controls within the accounting and financial reporting divisions to ensure that the city received no material weaknesses related to the financial statements for the first time in almost a decade. If confirmed by the committee, I will use my experience with the city to further streamline and enhance the Department of Finance's operations to ensure that we are providing the highest quality services to residents, businesses, and other city departments on a daily basis. This can be achieved by reviewing current processes, gathering data, using technology, and of course collaborating with this body. I look forward to working with you and the Department of Finance team to develop and implement financial management strategies. I don't take lightly the fiduciary responsibility that we have to the citizens of Chicago and will strive to improve the multiple of services that we provide. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to appear before this committee this morning. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
You're allowed to clap. Do I have any questions from my colleagues? Alderman Hairston.
Thank you. Good morning,
Good morning.
and welcome. Can you explain for us how the office determines what neighborhoods to go in to issue tickets?
So we actually use a process of with technology, and we also use data that we have available to see where most enforcement is needed. We concentrate mostly in the central business district since we have the most traffic and most enforcement needs. Our highest priority is safety. So we want to make sure that we're going to areas where if there are issues with, let's say, schools or parks nearby and we need to regulate, or residential areas where if people are not able to park because others who are not authorized to park are in that area, we will go to those areas. But our main enforcement is where enforcement is needed most, which would be the central business district.
So there were some reports last year and the year before about the number of tickets that were issued on the south side. Can you explain that or shine some light on that, please?
So the reports, the ticketing system is, based upon the staff. We have PEAs, about 100 of them, that go and are assigned to various areas. There are 120 zoning areas, and we're actually looking at reforming and restructuring those zoning areas to increase the areas, to concentrate more on areas where enforcement is needed. We want to use more data and analytics to ensure that we are not going into areas just for ticketing without there being a reason for enforcement. And again, safety is our main concern.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing what you do with that because there are some problems with it as it stands now.
And Alderman, I would request this board to let us know any areas that you see issues or any problems. We would love to work with you. We can't be out there all the time, but you guys are there. You see more than what we see. We would love to get your thoughts so we can make this process better.
Thank you.
Alderman Tunney.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
I see by your extensive experience, you've been with budget and finance and now the comptroller, so congratulations.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. You talked about billing, whether it's for, let's just talk about businesses. So where are you at with the technology, with the Hansen system and billing, and the fact that oftentimes these systems are not connected and not seamless? And I'll give you a case in point, or at least two that I can tell right now. Number one is, I've said this time and again, the billing for loading zones and private benefit is out of whack for at least 15 years. And part of that is the technology. I've tried to be very comprehensive in my auditing my loading zones and private benefits, and this technology is decades old, and we can't get it done. So we're losing money, and I know that's a citywide problem. So that, and then more recently, a lot of our colleagues have bemoaned the fact that tickets for refuse, overflowing garbage, it takes 9 months for the particular person to get a ticket received, or whatever. It's been, well, whatever it is, it's just totally not productive. It certainly is not changing behavior. So with those two in mind, what are we doing here to upgrade the system so that we can actually collect more money?
So there's a few things that we're doing. One thing with technology, we want to make sure that there's, as you mentioned, Alderman, interfacing or overlapping areas. So for example, if you're a business, you want to come in and you owe money to the city for whatever reason, we need the systems to be integrated and to be talking to each other so we are aware of the fact that a business might owe money so we can ensure to collect on it, and that would help us with more enforcement. Right now we have about 7 different accounts receivable systems, and they don't speak to each other. If we actively are looking, then yes, we can see it. So we are working on a technology to see if we can implement a process that would integrate all the information into one area. And in terms of enforcement and other methods, I would request any kind of support. This detail that you've given is quite helpful, but any ideas that you may have would be very helpful. And we can look into those very points that you brought up with Hansen and the other systems.
Yeah, well, we've been requesting this for at least a dozen years. Okay, so,
This is, this part, the integration is something new that we're doing. It's difficult because the systems don't, since they are not interfaced and they don't talk to each other, it's difficult to figure out the enforcement mechanisms, but we're hoping that we can create sort of a conglomerate system where it's a repository of all the information that will help us better in enforcing and providing information to those departments so we can collect on the debt that needs to be collected,
or write it off.
or write it off.
These businesses are out of business.
Yes,
So, it's so embarrassing as you're trying to have people come into compliance. Next, I know the comptroller's office is somewhat involved with the municipal depositories and some of the ordinance about, what are your thoughts on regards to the federal, whatever it's called, the neighborhood investment back into the communities versus what the requirements are of municipal depositories? I know we've been working with Kurt Summers on this, and the comptroller has been in the room quite a bit. This will come up again when we're talking about municipal depositories in terms of their community reinvestment and accountability by community area, I believe is what we were trying to do.
And I'm so glad you mentioned this. We're currently working on the RFP. As you're aware, that every year we have to do an RFP for municipal depositories, and they have to come back and provide to us what they can offer, and then we make selections based upon that. This idea is a very good idea, and it's something that we can put into the RFP itself to be able to have more of a enforcement mechanism, but also have more teeth in the game, saying that if you want to be a municipal depository with the city, we need you to go back and invest into the communities itself. And putting it within the RFP gives us some more teeth in it, because we'll be able to point to a requirement that's already listed in there. So that's something we can definitely look at doing.
Look forward to working with you.
Same here.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Tunney. Alderman Lopez?
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Chairman. First off, I'd like to congratulate and commend the mayor on your appointment. Gotten to know you through your various roles, so I'm not going to badger you relentlessly, but I do have some questions for you.
Thank you.
You mentioned in your speech that there were like monthly checks on departments to see how their spends are. What happens with those reports?
So the idea sure, sorry. So the monthly checks that we have implemented and budget works on is to ensure that the funds that are being expended are expended in a way that matches up with budget. And I would defer to the budget office; they can provide more backup on this. But also on our side, on the comptroller side, because we are doing all of the recording and all the information to provide, we're able to do a budget to actual trend and see how we're doing with the spend. I think it's important for departments to know what they're spending, what they have left, especially not only for savings, because savings obviously are very important, but also to see if we can invest money in any technology or any kind of investments. Knowing what the trends look like in budget help us to figure out if there's something that we can do in this very year itself to be able to reinvest and add more, I guess, make more efficiencies within those departments.
So are those reports shared with the City Council's Committee on Budget as well, or are they just internal reports, or, because I don't think I've ever seen one of those before.
Those are, and again, I should defer to the Department of Budget and Management. I mean, it's more of internal checks that we would be doing through the systematic reports. I can talk about on our side, what we do is on a monthly basis, ensure that we're reconciling, things match up, and if there's any discrepancies, then Comptroller's Office would follow up with the department to say there's discrepancies in the information we've provided, or with the help of budget, because there's monthly or quarterly budget spend set up. So let's say the board approves, the city council approves $1 million. Budget doesn't put out $1 million. They actually allow you to only spend in quarterly allotments. So that's where finance would come in and say, you're spending a little bit more than what is allotted for in this quarter, and try to help the departments to reel back and help them. Or if they're not spending enough, we want to make sure that invoices are coming through, payments are coming through, so we can properly expend those funds.
And the reason I ask is because obviously having, a very tight budget situation in the city of Chicago, the mayor in her speech said it was $1 billion, of which she found $162 million in savings and whatnot. I think it's kind of it would be very helpful for Alderman, in particular for our Budget Committee, and our chairman, who says she wants to be more proactive in addressing these issues, if we're able to be included as a council, or at least as a committee, where we're seeing those trends as they develop, because I think, as we're talking about, 160 million plus savings, I think the mayor said at one point that she had a hiring freeze for 3,000 employees across all departments. Those kind of numbers have real budget impact. And for example, if you have 3,000 employees who are positions that are not filled, we'd like to see, are those departments then masking their savings or their efficiencies by simply not hiring and filling out all the positions that the taxpayers have paid for. And I think it would be great if you as comptroller would include us as part of your reporting, if possible, without having to do it legislatively, because I think it would be a great effort on your part to ensure that we're able to have that moving forward.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you on that.
I know one of the things that we've heard during budget times, particularly when it comes to budget and revenue and all of those things, is that the weekend enforcement issues. And I want to just commend, I think Bill Keenan's behind me and everybody else for all their efforts to ensure that we are enforcing our laws as much as humanly possible, particularly in my ward. I and my residents truly appreciate that. But I know, one of the true areas where we lose the most amount of revenue is in how we've always been unable to capture the full breadth and scope of a 24-hour life in the city of Chicago. And I would ask that as part of the discussion in the group that you are involved with, is that not only do we look at the weekend enforcement, but that we look at, I know we have the private contractors who also assist with the issuing of tickets and things of that nature, if that's something that could be written in their tickets, as well as possibly even reviving the issue of having ticket writers that are ward specific to address the issues on the ground in real time, just as our ward superintendents and others are able to do. Other than that, I look forward to working with you and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all
Thank
the
you, Chairman.
feedback.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Riley?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Congratulations on your appointment. I'd also like to welcome you to City Hall in this different role. I wanted to pick up on a couple of points that my colleagues made earlier. Alderman Tunney was talking about this ongoing discussion about integrating our various departmental databases into one centralized database, or at least a couple. To Alderman Tunney's point, we've been talking about this since at least 2007, and have received assurances from Mayor Daley and Mayor Emanuel that this work was underway. And I know we have a brand new administration now who, I know the mayor appreciates how important this is, but do we actually have a decent sense of progress? Where do we stand with DoIT and the various departments? Because this has been I know it's a Herculean task,
Right.
and no one expects this to happen overnight. But has this been a continuous effort since '07 as far as you know, or has it been kind of in fits and starts? Or I'm just curious why it would take 12 years to get to this point.
So I don't have as much background in it, although I know from my various roles that it's something that has been worked on. What we're trying to do differently is that instead of trying to get systems integrated together, we're looking at the data that is in the systems and trying to see if we can interface and match the data. So like you have a field, if there's a field that can match across 7 different data sets, then we can use that as sort of like the common field and be able to get information that will help us with enforcing. And that's different from what we were trying to do before. So I'm hoping that this approach using the data will help us to at least start the process.
Sure, and I understand none of those efforts were under your direction or this mayor's direction.
Yes.
So the approach has changed over that course of time, rather than kind of trying to reinvent the wheel with a centralized database that plugs into databases. It's about scrubbing data and using it differently. Is that accurate?
Yes, every system is nuanced differently based upon the billing that's required. So, water would have different rules for billing versus the Handsome system versus accounts receivable. And looking at data itself and using that, I think will help us to start getting into the right direction of integrating that information.
Understood. And the reason I'm asking about that is there's another conversation we've been having in this building for a really long time, and that was the idea of working towards centralized billing and invoicing so that a business person in the city of Chicago who has various obligations throughout the year, they're receiving maybe 9 or 10 different types of invoices from the city based on how much stuff they need from the city. If you're a restaurant owner, for example, your right-of-way permits for your canopies and your outdoor cafe and your sign and your loading zone, all this stuff that pops up throughout the year. There are several of us who have been talking about this for some time, that it would be really helpful for business predictability and compliance if all of that landed on one invoice, that these business owners got date certain every year, that they can pay in full if they'd like, or in installments, but at least they know up front, this is the stuff I owe the city. I think the vast majority of business owners and licensed and permitted entities in the city want to comply, but when you're chasing invoices around, sometimes things fall between the cracks. And so I know that's also tied to the success of this integration project you're working on, but is that based on today's technology and what you're doing today with that data, is that an achievable goal in the short, mid, or long term? Because I do think that would help us have a better sense of our revenue streams also. Could you speak to that, please?
So that's something we can definitely look into. In this first phase of looking at data and being able to create that repository where you can tell, let's say, by a company what they owe would be the first step. Looking at the invoicing, we can see what technology is needed for that to be able to produce something that's meaningful to a business, and then hopefully keep track of what they need to expend. So that's definitely something we can look into.
Very good. And then I finally just have one last question, and that's related to the practice we have in the city, which was expanded under Emmanuel, notices to correct. So when city inspectors show up at a business, for example, they'll see a number of different right-of-way violations. Rather than issue a fine, they'll be issuing a notice to correct. And I think for a first-time offender, that's absolutely appropriate. I think it's good to warn business owners, hey, you might not have known this. You're obliged to do these things, get these things licensed and permitted. But what I find is that we have repeat offenders who, it's just a matter of the violation, it's going to be a notice to correct every single time. That's not driving compliance. And it puts Alderman in a tough spot. The illegal sign's been installed. Hey, Alderman, just sign this and I'm off the hook. That seems to me a bit backwards. My concern is that we're spending a lot of money deploying these inspectors, right? And they're writing violations with no fine and simply a notice to correct. And when they're having to go to the same business over and over again to give them essentially that warning / slap on the hand notice to correct, we're wasting the city's tax dollars on the use of that inspector. And so I'm not going to put you on the spot here today. I would just encourage you and your team to think about that a bit. Is there a way to reform that system and that practice so that we aren't flushing lots of tax dollars down the tubes, deploying inspectors for no good result? These are revenue-producing positions, and I think if we focus them on priorities, things that encourage public safety, that we'd actually see a return on the dollar for the deployment of inspectors rather than having them just issue a lot of pieces of paper to businesses to shape up. So I would just ask for you to look at that. Again, congratulations. I look forward to supporting your appointment and working with you in the future.
Same here, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
So for the last point, Alderman, we'll work with Department of Buildings, Department of Health, the departments that actually do the enforcement or going out with the inspectors, and see what we can do.
Thank you, Alderman Riley. Alderman Sposato?
Thank you, Chairman. No questions, just some comments. So congratulations on your nomination. I'm
Thank you.
confident you'll fly through at a 50-0 vote. Welcome back also.
Thank you.
Good to have you back. And just lastly, just want to say I know you've worked with them before, you know you have an awesome staff over
Yes,
there.
they're
So
fantastic.
got a bunch of familiar faces over there for you, so glad to have you back. Best wishes, and you will be having my support today. So
Thank you so much.
congratulations very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Reshma, congratulations.
Thank you so much, Alderman.
Voting on your confirmation may be the easiest vote that I take all year. I've known you for years, had the pleasure of working with you. You and I were in the trenches together in Cook County government. And even though you're no stranger to city government, to the people in this room, many of whom have worked with you, I just want my colleagues to know about the special circumstances under which you were brought into Cook County government. Those were challenging times. And there was quite a few issues that were dropped into your lap on day one. Literally everything you touched, you improved. Every project that you worked on, that I had the pleasure of working with you, you made it better. You saw things through to fruition. You were professional at all times. And the capability, the skill set, the professionalism that you bring to this job, we are fortunate to have you. And this is an outstanding appointment by Mayor Lightfoot. I congratulate you and look forward to working with you once again.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me. I feel very honored, not only to work with City Council, but to work with all the people who actually helped me to grow up and learn and bring me to this point. So without finance, I would not be here.
All set. Thank you, Alderman Hopkins. Alderman Dowell?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to also congratulate Reshmi for this and thank the mayor for this appointment. I did have one question. Sometime in May of this year, the city filed a lawsuit against the Illinois comptroller because the state refused to release a lot of grant money, which was due to the city of Chicago from various state agencies. Do you know what the status of that is?
I don't. I can find out more information. I would probably defer to Department of Law since they have the latest on that. But yes, the state offset program, or the state had offset funds, mainly I think due to pension-related items.
Right.
And I know that our legal team, Department of Law, was working on that.
Do you know about how much money in the aggregate that would be that the state is not giving to us?
I don't have that information. I can definitely provide it that through the chair and also get an update.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you,
you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Dowell. Do we have any other comments? Alderman Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too just want to echo my colleague's sentiments and congratulate you, Reshma, and to congratulate the mayor on an excellent appointment. It's great to see somebody who's come up through the ranks here in the city, and you've done a fantastic job, and I know you'll continue to do a great job as comptroller, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Alderman Austin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rashma, I want to first say thank you for helping me with an issue that I had earlier this month.
My pleasure.
In resolving that. But in your resume, you were the senior compliance officer. With that being a part of the committee that I chair, I would welcome your input and when we start having our subcommittee meetings, because this part of what you have done in years past would be very helpful for us in this new committee. And I hope that I could count on your support in this.
Absolutely. It would be my pleasure.
Very good, very good. Well, as everyone have said, we're welcome, and I believe that we all probably will support your appointment to as comptroller. It'll get a little heavier at budget time,
Yes.
but for now, you know, we're all glad to see you back.
Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Austin. And before we vote, we have one public comment. One person for public comment, Mr. George Blakemore.
Good morning to the staff and to the elected officials and to any concerned citizen. Most of these people over here, they're getting paid to be here. Some of these people are motivated to come down here for money. But to those who are here, just being a concerned citizen, without any other motive. Well, and you have a Rule 45, what, something new that's implemented. You don't want the speakers to speak on each item. Well, one of the aldermen asked the statements about these fines, fees, and violations, how they are targeted particular to poor black communities. And then you said it didn't happen, and it do not happen, it doesn't happen, one of these verbs. It happens. And for you to say that it doesn't, do not, again, these verbs, it happens. So you're old at the game here. You said 2009. I was thinking that Madam Lightfoot would bring new people in, not the same one just check them and moving them around the table. With these fines, fees are targeted, they can tell by your sticker where you live. They got a way of knowing. And some of you ultimates talking about finance and budget control, you are disgraceful because you sold the streets out. That was billions and millions of dollars that you could still be getting right here. But did you do that? No. Now you're coming in here trying to be so diplomatic and sophisticated, and you're gonna rubber stamp it. You rubber stamp when Emmanuel, Daley, that little machine, the wickedness, everyone comes up and you all appear like you're not in agreement, and then you say at the end, I. Rubber stamp. No dissent. Like a little organized gang-banging club here. Now the citizens, they don't get up and say that. I don't have to pander to you. Because number one, you don't want to see citizens informed, engaged, and enlightened to line up and speak. You want to keep them uninformed. I was listening. And you know you can learn if you don't even be able to read or write. You can learn by looking and listening. And I see it's a wicked game that's being played right here with controller, with the money, aviation, and all. That's why I show up. And some people say you show up, you like attention. In a protest, you got to get the attention. That's what it's all about. I want attention to the people to see who they have elected.
Yep. Thank you,
And
Mr.
I want them to, I want to know why you continuously doing this.
Thank you, Mr.
The
Blakemore.
revenue was in the street. You sold it out.
Thank you, Mr. Blakemore. May I have a motion to approve the appointment of Reshma Soni as City Comptroller? All in favor, that's moved by Alderman Riley. All in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to sit.
All right. Next item is a communication recommending a proposed ordinance on fines and fees. And as one of our first duties, the comptroller will be up here with Tina Consola from the Department of Finance. This is the fines and fees ordinance, and there's a substitute ordinance to be introduced. I have a motion to accept the substitute from Alderman Hairston. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. This is a proposed substitute ordinance to amend Municipal Code Chapters 356, 964, and 9100 regarding wheel tax license fees, violation fines, and payment plans. The amended ordinance seeks to lessen the economic burden of undue fines and fees for non-driving violations related to city sticker fines and fees, booting fees, and driver's license suspensions. Under this ordinance, the city will stop referring cases involving non-driving violations such as parking tickets, city sticker tickets, or license plate expirations to the Secretary of State for potential license suspension. And again, as I mentioned, we have Tina Consola, First Deputy Director of the Department of Finance, here to discuss this issue. Ms. Consola, you could give us a background on this, and we'll have discussion.
Good morning, Chairman Wagasback, Vice Chairman Hairston, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you and explain and answer your questions regarding this fines and fees reform ordinance before you. I'm very proud that the package in front of you takes important steps towards making Chicago's system of fines and fees equitable for individuals of all financial circumstances. I would like to thank Mayor Lightfoot, Clerk Valencia, Alderman Dowell, Alderman Villegas, Alderman Scott, Alderman Irvin, Alderman Sawyer, and Alderman Garza for their commitment to resolving this complicated issue. I would also like to thank the community advocacy groups, including Kofi Power Pack Illinois, Chicago Jobs Council, the ACLU, Heartland Alliance, Shriver Center on Poverty Law, and the members of the Chicago Transit Table for helping to drive these reforms. This ordinance has three main elements: payment plan reform, reducing city sticker penalties and tickets, and ending driver's license suspension for non-driving violations. Chicago's payment plans will become some of the most accessible in the country, allowing people to get right with the law and back to work. We're lowering down payments because we should always give people a pathway to compliance to pay off their fines so long as they're willing, even if it's only by paying $35 to $50 a month. Nobody should be forced to choose between an affordable payment plan or bankruptcy. And for those experiencing financial hardship, we're extending the time that you have to pay and eliminating default fees. In terms of city sticker reforms, we are proposing to end the doubling of city sticker tickets, reinstate the 15-day grace period for city sticker tickets, as well as we will be offering in the fall a city sticker ticket debt relief program. Currently, city sticker tickets double from $200 to $400 after the late penalty is assessed. Under this proposed ordinance, the late penalty for city stickers would only be $50, so that the city sticker ticket would only be $250 with the late penalty. Previously, Chicago drivers had a 15-day grace period after the expiration of their city sticker before tickets were issued. This proposed ordinance restores that grace period. And as I mentioned earlier, we are in collaboration with the city clerk offering a debt relief program that would focus on providing a pathway to compliance. This program is being developed in coordination with the city clerk and with her introduction of the 4-month sticker and her late fee amnesty. And lastly, but very importantly, the driver's license suspension, the city would stop sending the request to the Secretary of State for driver's license suspension. Upon passage of this ordinance, the city will no longer send the request to the Secretary of State for non-driving violations such as parking tickets, city sticker tickets, and license plate expiration tickets. It is important to note that these reforms, if passed, are the first step towards reducing the burden to city fines and fees for the hardest hit Chicagoans. The proposed reforms begin to address the impact of fines and fees on those who can least afford it, while offering more pathways to compliance to make the government more accessible, equitable, and efficient for every resident in every neighborhood. The city believes these changes will result in a net benefit to the economic health of the residents of the city of Chicago. We look forward to collaborating with you all in the future on future reforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Consola. Alderman Tunney?
Thank you, Chairman. Just quickly on your 15-day grace period. I know we've worked with the clerks and I think with finance historically about the RPP, the so-called visitor passes. Will they also have a 15-day grace period?
That is a good question. In this ordinance, I don't believe that section of the code was amended, but we should definitely look into that.
Well, if you don't, you'll have an inconsistency
Yes.
because you'll have a city sticker with the RPP already embedded. It has
Yes.
a 15-day grace period, but then you don't have the visitor passes eligible. And we have gotten tickets written on January 1st about this ridiculous nature. So we've really tried to give that 50, be consistent across the board.
Yes.
So I would suggest before we get this, that you make sure that
I agree.
include that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Tony. Alderman Cardenas?
Chairman, I've been briefed on the fines and fees changes. I guess I want to go back to, if you have any history on this, what exactly happened, got us to this point? I would imagine that people were not paying, that the need for revenue was there, and the urgency was there. So what kind of controls in place are you going to have to make sure the revenue also is on target, and it's not jeopardized by some of these changes?
So through the budget process, we will look for other revenue sources, but we do feel that in the long term that many of these changes are revenue neutral. We hope that more people will participate in our payment plans, people who previously would not have been paying but now can afford to pay. We hope that we are actually going to increase revenue that way as well.
In that process, is there any penalties? Is there any interest? Is this just a payment plan that 15 days out, you're going to pay the entire amount or part of the amount? How's that working?
So we have payment plan options, various payment plan options. We have payment plans that allow people to get on a payment plan as soon as they receive a ticket, and they have up to 6 months to pay without the late penalty. We have standard payment plans that allow for payment over 24 months with a low down payment of just their first monthly payment or maximum of $25. We also have an extended payment plan that will allow up to 60 months to pay, 5 years. There is no interest. There is a default penalty if you default, except for in the cases where there's hardship, we would waive that penalty.
Now, you get 2 tickets, and then you go into the boot, I guess, section, if you will, the potential boot. So if you're on this 20-month fourth payment plan, and you keep getting tickets, for whatever reason, and you're about to get the boot, or let's say you get the boot again, what happens then?
We have payment plan options for those who are booted as well. And in the case where you're on a payment plan and you continue to accrue tickets, you can add tickets to your current payment plan so you could avoid the boot. We're trying to be as flexible as possible to keep people in compliance.
So
so
you
that they-
potentially have a family in 5 payment plans. I mean, if we were to get that exaggerated about it, but that could be the case, right?
No, we would want to consolidate all of those tickets into one payment plan.
Okay. They're still going to be probably hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So what I'm saying is that if there's a trend, if you are a person that constantly is getting tickets, is there something there that's sort of stopgap that says, look, before you get more leeway, you got to pay these 2 payment plans or this payment plan up to a certain amount? If you keep adding that, I don't think we're helping anybody. That's my point.
Right. That is a concern, but also if that person needs their vehicle in
course.
order to
No,
get
no,
to work
I'm not-
and then we boot them, I mean, it's.
I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying that we got to help these folks also that, set expectations because the debt's not going to go away.
Right.
Okay? And even though they're going to get their vehicle back and they keep doing that, we don't want to be like a finance company that just keeps them as customers for, forever. The point is that we want to help them out and then get them on their way. There's got to be some parameters that gets a little more stricter. That's what I'm saying.
We can look into that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Irvin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You talked about the revenue implications of making these adjustments. Have you all run any models to look at what this potentially looks like? You're saying that you think it's going to be revenue neutral, but how can you assure us of that as we look at this looming deficit that exists today?
So we did determine that it would probably cost about $15 million, these changes we're making. As I mentioned, in the long term, we would like to think that it will be revenue neutral. But we have partnered with the University of Chicago, and they are going to help us assess the impact of these reforms.
So today, you all believe that this will decrease revenue by approximately $15 million
For next year, yes.
for next year, okay. However, your anticipation is that it will level out over time.
Yes, that is our hope.
Okay. Question, how much in bad ticket debt do we currently have? Just parking, because this is primarily dealing with parking.
We have about 1.3 billion in unpaid tickets. It's not all bad debt per se. Some of it is still collectible.
I apologize, I should not have used that term, bad debt, but just overall, the AR roll is 1.3 billion.
Yes, we collect about 75% of the tickets each year, and so the 25% keeps accumulating.
Keeps accumulating. Has anybody thought about having an amnesty program where you could come in, get clean, and move forward by paying, if it's 50% or some number, or forgiving the fine or just paying the original fine, just overall? No, that's just for the sticker. Just, in general, to try to either help clear people's debt out, get them on a payment plan, offer them some terms that can move the ball forward. Is that something that
We've had.
contemplating this?
Hold on a second.
Sorry.
Point of information, Alderman Tunney.
For the deputy, just when Alderman Irvin's asking about this bad debt, how much of it is in-state versus out-of-state, I think is important, because I know a lot of times it's really difficult to get money from out of state. So I just, through the chair, if we would know that, I don't think you know that off the top of your head, but I just think that's one of the hurdles also. Thanks.
Okay, we can provide that through the chair. Oh, thank you. In terms of amnesty, we have offered amnesties in the past, and we've had 3. And so each time we offer an amnesty, it's a little bit less effective. So this debt relief program that we are offering in the fall, we wanted to actually help those who really needed the most help. And based on the data, city sticker tickets are the biggest burden to many of the motorists. So we want to give those people a pathway to compliance, so they can get they can get their city sticker, they can be in compliance that way, and then also they are relieved of the burden of the city sticker debt. But we can look at a more general, amnesty program for the future.
You speak of city sticker debt. What percentage, and if you don't have this question, you can answer, you can get this through the chair, of the debt is strictly city sticker related?
I will have to get that through the chair.
Okay. Have we made any consideration into lowering the fine? I mean, we shot the fine up to $200. I didn't agree with that. Are we looking at potentially lowering the fine from $200 back to, it was probably at $1.50 or $100, and just in general, having a conversation of lowering the fines, because that's one of the challenges. If you can't pay the fine, people, they move it along, and they end up in this, in this downward snowball effect that puts them further and further behind. Have we looked at that and its implication on people's payment?
This ordinance does not lower the fine, obviously, you know that, but we can look at that in the future. However, our early payment plan option allows motorists up to 6 months to pay. So if they do get that $200 fine, they can pay over 6 months. That's one option to help.
But it's like, what they call it, death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, $200, a $200 fine, it may be a little steep. And these are things that, if it doubles on you, that's $400. Please, generally, you may get more than one, because you may be waiting for that next payday to buy a sticker. And if you get more than one of these things, they just continue to snowball on you. But I'll move on from that. I want to go to the immobilization. Why not just make the immobilization period just 48 hours versus having to come in and ask for another 24 hours when in fact you may not even know that your car has been booted until the 18th hour that after the boot has been applied. So why not just give everybody 48 hours to come in before your vehicle is towed?
We can look into that, but we have found that the longer that we leave the vehicles with the boot on the street, the rate of tampering goes up. So our thought was that if someone is requesting an extra 24 hours, we would give it to them, but also trying to safeguard, the boots because they are expensive. But we can look into that and actually measure the impact of leaving it out there for an extra 24 hours automatically.
I mean, do we not have enough boots to make that happen, or?
We would have to invest in additional inventory because, our process counts on having the turnover of the boots.
How many boots do we have?
I don't know, I would have to get that from the chair, or through the chair.
And my last question is about suspensions. We changed the language from shall to may. So when will we actually suspend? At what point?
So once this is passed, if it is passed, we will stop suspending for parking and compliance violations immediately.
So are you saying that we will never suspend? Or at some point, while I understand the motivation, we go in varying levels to get people's attention. I understand that we may not want to suspend somebody at a point, but at some point, suspension should be utilized. And I'm trying to get an understanding of when that point may be, and if that point does or does not exist, who has the authority under the ordinance to make that determination?
So, the plan is to not suspend for parking and compliance violations, but to suspend for red light and speed camera. I would have to go back to the team and we would have to figure out if we ever did want to suspend. But there is a bill at the state level right now that we are supporting that would end suspensions for parking and compliance violations. So we may not have a choice at some point.
But we do have a choice now, and I don't know how well that bill is going to fare under the pressure of the IML, but I do think we need to define when we will suspend licenses, because to say that you will never suspend, may also pose an additional challenge, because there are some people that lack the respect, for the law, that suspension should be utilized.
Right.
And I'm just trying to understand when that would be, who makes that decision.
We can meet with you further on that and discuss further.
But you want us to vote on this today, right?
Oh, I don't have the authority to say when we will, so I can get an answer for you, but I don't know that it will be a definitive answer.
Might it be the lady sitting next to you?
Hello? Okay, sorry. Reshma Soni, Acting Comptroller. Alderman Irvin, so that is something that our office doesn't have the ability or doesn't have the authority to decide. It would be something that we would need to go through further discussions. I think the point that you make is good. We should look into it, but that would be something that we would have to go back and take some time. But I would think that's something that we could even add on later if needed.
So who currently has the authority to submit for suspension?
The Department of Finance does have the authority to submit for suspensions, but we would want to do that on a consistent basis. We wouldn't want to just pick and choose, so we would have to set some parameters around if we were going to use that authority, when. So is it when someone has, 50 tickets? Or, we would want to be fair and transparent and consistent. So we would want.
Agreed. I just think that the fact that you totally take that off the table does not, for those that are law-abiding, I think it's unfair to them. I do think, while granted, I understand the goal that the mayor has and the team as we went through this have, but I do think at some point it may be necessary. I'm just trying to, understand who, because the authority in this ordinance still vested. So somebody should be charged with that decision-making. And I saw the term traffic compliance administrator, and who is that individual?
That would be the comptroller.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like you ultimately have the authority to make these decisions. Only thing I'm asking for is when, because you do have the authority to do it. It's not, we didn't just totally take it away from you. So we just need to understand when you would implement that. If that needs to come back, actually it doesn't need to come back because you have the authority.
Right.
We just need to know via rule how you plan to implement that.
And so I should have clarified, sorry, that we have the authority in the ordinance that has been approved by City Council. We're changing the language to say from shall to may. So that retains the authority. It's just not that we're forced to send it. The decision, to your point, on when do we do that, I think would be something that we would want to discuss, and any input that you would like, that you could provide to us, and us discussing with the mayor's office as well, I think would help us to figure out those parameters and outline those parameters so we have guidelines on when we should submit.
I have no objection to that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Point of information, Alderman Dell.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to be clear. When Alderman Irvin asked about the city sticker debt percentage, and you said you'd get it back through the chair, is the parking debt number inclusive of city sticker debt, or is that a different number?
It's inclusive.
It's inclusive. Okay, thank you very much. So this is overall, not, what do you call that? What's your official term for that? It's not parking debt, because it's
Compliance.
compliance debt. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Alderman Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things, housekeeping. One, this is a substitute ordinance. I don't recall, did we introduce a substitute? Did we?
Yes.
Okay, we did, I'm sorry. So can you tell me what's the difference? Because I just got this. What's the difference between this ordinance and the one we got the other day?
The date of effectiveness is the difference. It's for November 15th. That's the only difference.
Okay. And then, in terms of the financial analysis, I know you had mentioned some of these debts, Tina. Was there a breakdown of the $15 million deals with all three areas, correct?
Correct.
You have a breakdown as to each one, or could you get that through the chair?
It's $7.5 million for the lowering of the late penalty for city stickers.
And just to clarify, that went from $200 to $50.
Correct.
Okay, so that's $7 million?
7.5.
Okay.
4.2 would be from the ending of driver's license suspensions. And then another 3.3, I believe, I think that adds up to 15, is for the debt relief program. That, although we're having that debt relief program at the end of this year, some of those tickets would have been paid next year, so we're factoring in that lost revenue.
Okay. And then you had mentioned that this is dealing with folks that typically can't afford to pay.
Correct.
So do we do a financial analysis? Do you have to submit like your W-2? How do we prove up that these are folks that can't afford it?
So for the online payment plans, it's a self-certification. You just have to attest that you have met the financial hardship qualifications.
And what are those qualifications?
So the qualifications, well, so this ordinance actually proposes a little bit of an addition to the hardship category. So this ordinance also expands it to include those that are at 300% of the poverty level or are experiencing a financial emergency. Currently, our hardship categories include those that are on some sort of government assistance, such as LIHEAP or Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment, those types of categories. It includes seniors, it includes students.
Is that included, I'm sorry, just to clarify, is that all included in the summary or just in the body of the ordinance?
So in the body of the ordinance, all that it says is that it's, the definition includes those that are at 300% of the poverty level, the federal poverty level, or those with a financial emergency.
So that's the new criteria.
Yes.
And financial emergency,
Could be something that, an illness in the family, a sudden illness, a sudden death, a loss of a
but
job.
that's subjective to the,
Right. We will also, so that it's not subjective and so that we are consistent, we will definitely be setting those parameters so that everyone is treated equally. We don't want one person saying no to something that the other person would say yes to. So we definitely want consistency, so we will definitely document the parameters for those types of emergencies.
but we would have to include the definition in this ordinance for that to be effective.
No, we can put it in rules and policies so that everyone would be treated consistently. I believe we would put it in rules.
So is there somebody from the law department that could attest to that? And just, when do those rules come out?
So the rules would come out at the time that the ordinance, that we roll out the new payment plans. The plan is to roll out the new payment plans by November 15th. So the rules would have to be published before then. And we do, would be happy to work with any of you that have ideas for those rules.
Point of information, Alderman Hairston. Was that? Oh, I'm sorry. Is
Okay.
that a point of information? Alderman Urban.
For example, would like the suspension criteria, could that also be included in the rules before this is implemented?
We can look at that, yes.
Okay.
We will work with
Thank you.
law on that.
Alderman Thompson.
And I know you're the messenger, so I'm not, I know, but you're in there. I'm asking questions, because in the past where things have been said, it would be clarified in the rules. For me, it wasn't clarified in the rules. And then I was told by law, it has to be included in the ordinance, and it's not in the rules. So
So-
there's
I'm sorry.
just for my own experience of being here, so I'm just trying to make sure that we don't set ourselves up and that everyone that it's level and that we're helping those that actually need it and not somebody that just goes online and pays it late and says, I had a financial hardship.
Right. It's a hard thing to balance.
Yep. Alderman Thompson, we'll have somebody come down from law.
Okay.
If you want to continue, that's fine. We can
Sure.
come back to you as well.
I'll continue. So then, do we also know, in terms of habitual abusers here, how many, we have the debt, which you said is 1.3, accounts receivable, I should say, is 1.3 billion. Can we get a breakdown what's 30, 60, and then 90 days out, and then what's north of that, so we can see what, because you mentioned there's some that we can collect.
Right.
Quite a bit which we can collect.
Right. I mean, we do collect quite a bit of millions from, tickets that are older than 10 years old. So every year.
Do we use an outside service for that?
We do collections in-house, and then we also, yes, we use outside law firms, and we also have 2 outside collection agencies.
Good. But to look and see how many of these violators are recurring. Because one thing that I heard you say is that if if somebody has a ticket and then they get another ticket, they could just add that to the payment plan. And then they get another ticket, they add that to the payment plan. They get another ticket, we just add it to the payment plan. At some point, there's a little tough love. We've got to stop. And how do we do that?
I do believe that we have an obligation to educate people on how to, get out of that cycle of debt. It is something that.
It's not a cycle of debt. It's a chronic violation of the law. The only reason their debt is increasing is because they continue to get tickets, and we're not doing anything to stop them from, we're enabling them. And so at some point, we have to say, okay, if you're not going to park your car, if you're going to continue to park your car in a handicap zone, we're going to take your privilege away from parking in the handicap zone, because you're actually taking it away from somebody who needs to park there. But under this scenario, we're just going to add that to the debt, and then we'll just add it to the debt. So then, a handicapped person has to park a block away.
We can explore other avenues in trying to stop the chronic
Well, I think
bad parkers, but.
My
Yes.
colleague Alderman Irvin's
Yes,
point is
right,
that
right.
the may, and to talk about whether or not at some point we have to review that.
So I think, based upon what Alderman Irvin had said before, and now what you're mentioning, it's definitely something that we should look at in terms of providing that criteria, and we can work with law to have that criteria spelled out. So there is some kind of stopping mechanism, that it's just not that chronic buildup, and then people feel like they have a way out. And the real problem, which is the lack of them following the law, is not being enforced. So we can
Right.
definitely look into that hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason is, this isn't a revenue, even though it does create revenue. The intent of it is a deterrent from behavior.
Right.
That's why we have this.
Right.
So if we're not going to deter that, I think we're going to run into some issues. And then the overall cost, of this, and I understand balancing, especially those that are in financial difficulties. But, it's still $15 million. And we're looking at a budget deficit of $700 million. And now it's $715 million. Or $800 million.
38.
Okay, 838 plus 15. I'm a lawyer, so somebody else do the math. But thanks, 852. 853, going once. I feel like an auctioneer. But my point is not to make light of it, but, we're going the wrong way, and now we've just increased that debt by $15 million. And I understand there's a hardship with some folks in paying for it, but my residents in my community have a hardship with paying an increased property tax and increased fees and fines, and they obey the law, and they abide by the law, and they pay their debts. And, I know it's a challenging and difficult situation, but I also think we have to look at those that are obeying the law and paying their debt and not burden them with this additional cost because we have somebody who is a reoccurring violator of our ordinances. So I look forward to working with you then on the rules, if we can get somebody to clarify from law, if they come down and explain how that's going to be done. And then I look forward to some of the answers that come through the chair. And again, Tina, I understand you're the messenger up there. I think you're doing a great job. But it's just a bigger issue financially for the city.
Right.
Thanks. No further questions.
Alderman, we'll come back to you when law comes down. Alderman Hairston?
Thank you. So there's 1.3 billion in unpaid tickets, so hypothetically, if everybody paid their tickets, we would not be in debt as a city?
Hypothetically, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. So back to the boot. What are the guidelines for boot removal? I've encountered some constituents with issues of, having paid. They discovered early on that they got a boot, and they immediately went as soon as City Hall opened and paid it. And then it was quite a length of time before they could get it removed. So while we are doing these reforms, we have to make sure that the reforms are fair in terms of the resources that the city has, because while somebody may have a boot and they may be ready, willing, and able to pay the fine, it is not guaranteed that that boot will be removed and then that car still remains on the street. So what are we doing on that end?
Our goal currently is 4 hours, to remove the boot within 4 hours. We definitely we can look into ways that we could improve that time.
Okay, so it's not working. You have not even looked at, it's not 4 hours. It is definitely not 4 hours. And then on some days, if it's the day where there's a holiday, it's even longer. The weekend hours. So we have some issues with how we remove the boot, and that should be just as important as these other reforms that we are putting in, because otherwise, if there's nobody to remove the boot and City Hall is closed, then the fee doubles and triples, and it's because it's on our end. So we need to look at the hours. We need to look at the weekends and other payment options for people that actually do want to come into compliance, instead of having it rest on the consumer. So, I mean, can I just hear your thoughts on that? Because have you run any numbers?
Run numbers on on average, how long it takes for us to remove the boot? I would have to look. I don't remember the last time that we did it. So we would have to run those numbers again. But I agree with you, the weekends are a concern and a problem that we do need to solve.
Well, I mean, for people that we're assuming people that are working, they need to get to work and they can't, and it's because of us.
Yes, I agree with you.
You get what I'm saying. I think that was the only question that I had. I do believe that Representative LaShawn Ford at the state level, and I think the governor did sign the bill where you would not lose your license.
I'm not sure the status of that.
Based on your fees and your fines. I think that was signed this summer.
Okay.
Okay. All right. No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Lopez.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Tina. How are you today?
Good morning, how are you?
I have a question. Would it be possible to get through the chair where these 69,000 suspended driver's license are by ward? Do you have that information? Or are you able to get that to us so we could see where the highest propensity
We don't
is?
have it with us. We can get it to you, yes.
Awesome. Thank you. I do want to commend the mayor and the other elected members of the committee. Take it easy on there. For this. But I do have one question. Kind of piggybacking off what Alderman Urban brought up, which was the issue of the amnesty. And I know, to Alderman Thompson's point, there are people who legitimately are trying to pay their debts, and some that we won't ever collect. It's just like a bad negative on our balance sheet. What steps are you all considering to try and just wipe them off once and for all and be done with it? Or are you open to actually having a true amnesty and like zeroing event where we can actually just start fresh without having to carry all this negative balances over and over and over again, giving us this false sense of that we have some sort of collectible option available?
We are open to discussing options. I mean, it's something that is asked about frequently, and it's something that we've looked at. As I mentioned earlier, we do collect,
75%.
75%, and we do collect millions of dollars each year from tickets that are older than 10 years old. So the issue would be trying to find the right point in time in which to waive the tickets.
So, and then my other question as it relates to some of these funds that are owed that we don't seem to collect on is, for certain individuals, they just simply do not have the means to actually pay them. And one of the things that we've seen in other cities is this rise in community service in lieu of cash for violations, things of that nature. Is that something that revenue would be open to start looking at to see how we can possibly give our citizens the opportunity to do community service on behalf of the city instead of trying to come up with whatever the value of their collectible compliance debt would be?
We have looked into it somewhat because, we have also looked at those other cities, and I know cities like San Francisco have an option, but, they pay a certain amount per hour. So if someone has a lot of debt, as some people do, they'd be doing a lot of community service to pay off that debt. And then if they're working, I don't know when they might have time to do the community service. So, and then to run that program would also, we'd have to figure out what resources the city would need to run such a program to make sure that it was,
Well, I don't think it's necessarily as doom and gloom as and overly cumbersome as it sounds, because I think that even with Chicago now pushing towards a $15 minimum wage, even if you extrapolated what giving someone $15 a service hour or whatever a credit hour would be, for the individual who's struggling by a thread to hold on to their job, for the individual who that license is their only lifeline, working with, say, streets and sanitation to actually go out and clean a vacant lot in a neighborhood might seem like a more suitable option than trying to come up with a $200 ticket, money for a $200 ticket. And I think that if we're giving people and coming up with all of these extravagant ways to not have to pay, or coming up with all these payment plans to extend the life of their debt to us, then I don't think it's outside the scope of possibilities for this city to figure out how we can do the same for individuals who would rather give up a couple weekends than give up $200, because that $200 might be their groceries for the month. So I would strongly recommend that we look at that as an option also as we're moving forward, because if this is not meant to be punitive, it's supposed to be corrective, then let's give people the full breadth and scope of options to make their behaviors corrective while able to do something positive in their neighborhoods.
We can, yes, definitely continue exploring.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Alderman Osterman.
Mr. Chairman, I support the intention of what we're trying to do here. A couple quick questions. If you get information to Chairman Wagsback in the Budget Committee. I'd be curious, or would like to request, the numbers of parking tickets, red light tickets, speed camera tickets for 2017, 2018 by ward. Give us a head start on the budget, so I would appreciate that. And maybe I missed this. What is the effect of this ordinance for 2019, not 2019, 2020? What are we going to lose annually?
15 million
Okay.
for 2020?
And how is the department, or how is the city, I understand that this is going to help the bigger picture. How are we monitoring that, or are we going to do a study in a year and a half to say that less people lost their jobs, et cetera?
We have partnered with the University of Chicago to help us assess all the impacts, the various impacts, financial and, the impacts to the public as well.
So they're going to study this after the fact and report back to the city council and the mayor on the effects of this?
Yes, that's the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Villegas? And he stepped out for a moment. So Alderman Riley?
Thank you, Chairman. I also support the objectives of this ordinance, but during debate, some of the responses I've heard have raised a few extra questions for me, and they're mostly related to payment plans and those folks who are, prove themselves to be chronic offenders. And so here's another, I'm sorry for the hypotheticals, that's the best we can do here, but hypothetically, someone enrolls in a payment plan and they show good faith for, say, 5 or 6 months of payments, and then they just simply stop. And this would not be someone who would fall under the definition of a hardship client. What then would be the penalty or the consequences for that person just simply giving up halfway through or a quarter of the way through?
So there would be a $100 default fee assessed to their account, and then they're subject to booting and whatever other enforcement mechanisms that are out there.
And then for those folks who are dutifully making their payment plan payments, who are not hardship clients, but then continue to, I think maybe Alderman Thompson brought this up, so they're paying, but the payment plan installment, but they're continuing to rack up more and more of these same violations. I just want to make sure I have this clear. We'll simply add that to the overall balance, and
If they request to do so, yes.
otherwise, those tickets would what?
So if those tickets aren't added to a payment plan, those tickets could cause the boot, or if they were red light or speed camera violations, they could cause a suspension.
Okay. And for those folks who are hardship clients and continue to chronically commit the same violations, what do we do with the hardship client in that scenario?
We would allow them to add tickets to their payment plans,
Okay.
or enter into new payment plans, I'm sorry.
So I guess then I join with Alderman Irvin and Thompson and maybe some of my other colleagues that during rulemaking, we need to figure that out because eventually there do need to be consequences. This is about compliance. The other is related to the fiscal projections. So you've calculated this ought to cost us about $15 million next year. Given these kind of unresolved variables related to payment plans and consequences and all that, what methodology was used to arrive at that number, and then likewise to determine that over time there will be no fiscal impact to the city? Was there a certain set of formula used there, or was it just kind of a best guess, or how did you arrive at those numbers?
Well, so for the ending of doubling of city sticker violations, we used past historical data to see how many people pay per year pay the late fee per year, the late penalties, and, just applied a formula, and so now it would only be $50 instead of $200 they'd be paying. So that was based on that. For driver's license suspension, it was again, narrowing down the population of those who pay as a result of a driver's license suspension. And then for the 3.3 million for the unpaid city sticker, that was an estimate just based on what we believe would have been paid next year that may be waived this year during the debt relief program.
Did you also provide an analysis of those folks who would be considered a hardship client under the definition, how much money that client base was paying on an annual basis, or not paying at all, or did you look at that group of ticket payers?
We have not. I mean, we look at it periodically, but we do know that about 50%, 50 to 60% of our payment plans that are considered hardship payment plans.
Okay. It would be helpful through the chair if you could supply the math and data used to arrive at this projection. It may also be helpful, Chairman Dowell, if has been COFA engaged in any of this at all?
No.
COFA. So I'll submit a letter to Chairman Dowell today to request that they take a quick look. I think that'll be helpful. Again, I support this ordinance. I think the administration is right to look for reform here. But given what we're looking at next month, it'd be helpful for us to have a better sense of the midterm potential fiscal impact on the city's finances. Thank you for answering my questions, and thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Riley. Alderman Raboyers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tina, thank you for being here, and I apologize that I'm going to ask. I hope I don't ask questions that have been asked. So if I do, just let me know, okay? But I also want to thank the team that's back here because we deal with them weekly, daily basis. Thank you, Bill Keenan, for everything you do. But Tina, is there a chance that you guys already worked out how we're going to proceed moving forward with this Secretary of State with all these licenses that are suspended? And it's a loaded question, I hate to say it. And if you've already answered that, just say it. Of these 69,000, is it? 69,000 possible driver's licenses that are in suspension status, I'm going to guess that some of them have deceased. And does that continue, that record continue? And is there a way of letting their families know that, you know, we're not going to look for revenue that's not there, or the person is not there anymore with us? And have you done any, what is it, is there a protocol, and I'm guessing the state has to be involved in this, of how we're going to reinstate each person's license? Has that been discussed yet?
We did start discussions with them, but the details have not been formulated. But, you know, they know this is coming, and again, based on the bill that's at the state level, they know that this is coming as well. So we have started talking to them, and we have to continue to determine the best way to make it easy for the motorists to have their license reinstated.
Is there a guesstimate of time, how the 6 months maybe, at least? And there's a chance that they might suspend their licenses that they don't currently have while this process is going on, because I'm going to guess that most of them are still driving, because they have to. I could be wrong.
So my understanding, and I probably have to defer to the law department, but my understanding is that we cannot reinstate the licenses until a bill passes at the state level.
Is that right? Okay.
So although that, you know, we have to wait for that to happen, we have started discussions with the Secretary of State so that if that happens, we have a plan in place to help those with suspended licenses receive their licenses back quickly and conveniently. And then as far as if someone has passed away, in general, if someone has passed away and their families let us know, we do take that debt off the books.
Good, very good. But I also, I want to commend our mayor because this has been going on for eons. And I think we had to address this as soon as possible. So I want to thank the mayor and the administration for moving forward on this. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Moore?
Thank you, Chairman. I was trying to look in the ordinance, and I just wanted to be clear. On the fact sheet where it says, where under no same day or consecutive day ticketing for compliance violations, they say they will have a full day to get in compliance. Does the ordinance state a full business day, or are we telling people just a full day, and that means assuming that, and I think this is for, or this could be any ticketing, so whether it's sticker or whatever. So should we make sure that one full business day is in the ordinance? And it could be, and I was reading through the ordinance, I didn't see it.
No, that's not in the ordinance. That would actually be in our rules. And so if that is something that we would like to look at, what a calendar day versus a business day, that's something that we can look at in the rules.
Okay, and then just to add, I think to what some of my other colleagues touched on, and that's at some point, and again with what Alderman Hairston stated, without me fully understanding the state's law about license suspension and how it coincides with ours, but at some point, something has to take place, whether it's $1,000 limit that your license gets suspended. Otherwise, I think we will be doing ourselves a disservice if it, not ourselves, the individual, what you want to watch, you don't want individuals to constantly be in debt. And so there has to be, I think, some type of limit before a license is suspended. I think we should set something. I'm totally grateful to the mayor and the team for wanting to do something about this. But I think if it just continues and a person get up to 1,000, 2,000, they, okay, I'm paying all my debt, and they're not, some type of penalty besides a fine is not given to them, I think it would hurt them more than help. And so whether that's once you reach $1,000 or whatever, I think we really should consider something like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Cardenas.
Chairman, this was going to be more of a point of information, but I think some of the comments from the colleagues, like some of the changes in the business days, ought to be just taken into account and then make the changes, instead of just saying we'll look into it. I think it ought to say a 5 business day from the start, without people get confused about what that means. If there's a holiday in between, it's Saturday, Sunday, someone should know that the city operates from a business day standpoint. If you call the city and it's not a business day, you're not getting any answers. And that's the way we ought to tell folks. That's the way we operate, and they should know that. Instead of, having constant fear that they just blew the 5-day and they're going to get booted again.
Okay.
So, and Chairman, I was talking to, here, it's a sidebar, in terms of the $200 fine. I think my colleague, Irvin, did mention that I'm on his side when it comes to the limit of the $200, not limit, but fine, and why so high. And the reason that people are getting into debt is because we set these high numbers and people just can't meet them. That's the reality. And the fact that we have a 2-day boot on top of that, it adds to the grievance. And so, yeah, we want to give people a chance. We want to give people, to pay later into the payment plan. But the bottom line is that we still have these barriers pretty high. So let's lower the barrier if we want to help somebody out. Instead of adding some debt to the poor fella or woman, another $200 and $200, they're never going to get out of debt. Let's be realistic. They can't pay $200. What makes you they're going to pay $1,000? So we do have to have some limits, and we have to have before we vote on this, what that limit is in terms of debt. Because if we're just going to keep adding debt and debt on top of these payment plans for these folks, I'm uncomfortable with that. If you want to help them, I'm with you. This city has to run. The city needs its revenue. We need to understand that, but we also have to have people out, no doubt about it. But you got to have these parameters, these triggers that make it, either more easy or more bearable. But it also sends a strong message, something like, look, we're going to help you, but we also need to collect that money. But I have not heard. I've heard, yeah, well, this is going to help. We're going to help people as much as possible. Not a problem. But I've not heard anything strict. I've not heard anything that I think it's also helping the debt itself. The payment plan is great. I do agree. The suspension of the license, lifting that's also great. But what doesn't go away is $200 ticketing or $100 and then doubling that. That's what's getting people into trouble. And the fact that after 2 tickets, you are booting them. That's another $100 on the boot. That's $300. So how are we helping them? I guess if you can answer that.
Well, so our payment plan options are there to try to help people get on payment plans early and avoid the boot and avoid late penalties. So we have, like I mentioned earlier, the $200 or the early payment plan, so that once you get that ticket, you can get on that payment plan right away. The clerk is also offering a 4-month city sticker. So, if someone does find themselves out of compliance with the city sticker ordinance, they can go and they can buy an affordable 4-month payment or 4-month city sticker. These reforms may not solve everything, but these are just the first steps in trying to resolve some of these issues. And we look forward to hearing all of your ideas and working with you on future reforms.
No further questions, Chairman. I think we've beat this thing to death.
Thank you. Alderman Villegas?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'd like to thank Kofi for their tireless advocacy on this issue. It was a pleasure working with this organization. We introduced this ordinance a couple years ago, and I'm glad that this administration took this, one of the first things they took up. I had a question related to the debt where the outside collection agencies are involved. How are we going to address that issue with the agencies that are doing the collection now? Are we going to work with them to try to figure out, and when I say with them, I mean the entity that's, that has the fees, work with them so that way the collection agencies, the law firms that are doing these collections, that they're also going to have some type of amnesty as well? Does that make sense? I mean, because the way I understand it works is you get these tickets, and then at some point, they're turned over to outside law firms in order to do collections. And on top of that, the fee and the doubling of it, there's also legal costs that are associated with that. And then also additional funds that the city puts on there, if I'm not mistaken. So how are we going to address that issue as well?
So, yes, you're right. After the tickets are referred to an agency, a collection fee is assessed. However, the debt always remains in control of the city. So if we're doing a debt relief program and we're just waiving the tickets, based on certain criteria, the law firms don't get paid for that. And actually, if a motorist gets on an online payment plan, because the law firm has nothing to do with that, that is our system that someone is using to get on that payment plan, we don't assess the 22% collection fees either on that. So we are looking at ways on top of, these reforms to try to save people from having to pay the collection fees and truly only pay the collection fees to the law firms when their efforts have brought in that collection.
Okay. So if the person who has the outstanding debt goes to our website or goes to the website and then enters into that program, they do not have to pay the legal fees?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Alderman Irvin, you had another question?
I did have one point. As it relates to suspensions, it is my understanding that if we decided to lift the suspensions regardless of ticket payment or not, that's within our control to do under some specific guidelines. So we said lift all the suspensions, we can do that. I do not believe that payments have to be done in order to do that. They still have to deal with the Secretary of State's fees, but we have the right and the ability to lift the suspensions on licenses. I don't know what other information you had to the contrary of that, unless the law has changed in the last few years. Has there been a change in law, or?
I have to defer to the law department because that was the advice that we were given. So if it's incorrect, we will definitely do whatever we are legally able to do.
Okay. Point number 2, Chairman. We have an implementation date of November 15th. Is that correct?
That's in the substitute, yes.
In the substitute. So let me just say this. I think we got a lot of questions. I think there are a lot of concerns around the rules and how this is going to be implemented. And contrary to what happens in the legislature, I don't know, have we given rulemaking authority in this to the department, or how will we get that resolved before implementation? And do we have to come back and vote on those rules?
In terms of rulemaking, I think just like most of our other ordinances, we do that. Everything from food truck licensing, rideshare. On this issue, we've had rulemaking in that department for, I think, as long as we've been talking about this issue.
Okay. Is it, shouldn't we see what the rules look like before we pass this ordinance, is my question, ultimately?
Well, I think the rules would be set separately from the actual ordinance.
I understand that, but should we have some understanding of the rules? Because we all have varying views on what the rules should look like. And I think we, part and parcel, should have that conversation on the front end, opposed to having that conversation on the back end after the rules have been promulgated and we don't agree, we may not agree with them. I'm saying we may not agree with the rules. That's all. And secondly, I do think that from a policy perspective, that amnesty in some way, shape, or form beyond city stickers need to be included in this conversation. If we're looking at the city sticker component, but people have more than city sticker. We want a clean slate, or give people opportunity for a clean slate, and maybe this may offset that $15 million that Alderman Thompson was talking about earlier. That we can get all of this and maybe make, at least in year one, make this fully revenue neutral, given the fact that of the deficit that we are looking at, and we, by admission, know we're going to lose $15 million of revenue for 2020 at least.
Thank you. Alderman Thompson, did you want to follow up on that since that was the original question?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I did have an opportunity to talk to the law department just in clarifying whether or not it is feasible to handle it in rules. They've indicated that based on the drafting here of the ordinance, because it specifically allows for the rules promulgated by the administrator, and the administrator is the city's traffic compliance administrator, which the comptroller is the ex officio of that. So they do have the authority, which was one of my questions. The next comment to follow up on Alderman Irvin's is whether the comptroller will be willing to work with the city council to see those rules, and whether we have a briefing and have a discussion. And I would think by the nodding of up and down, that's a yes by the comptroller,
Yes.
soon to be comptroller.
Yes, I think that in terms of process, we usually do wait for City Council to actually pass the ordinance before we set up rules, just in case the ordinance itself has any changes. We don't want to go through a process already of setting up rules and then realizing that it doesn't make sense anymore. But to answer your question, Alderman, we are definitely willing to meet with whomever is interested in City Council, either we form a group or go through briefing sessions, go through the rules and make sure that we're addressing these concerns so everybody's on the same page of what we're trying to do and achieve, which is basically ensuring that there is the enforcement and safety that's out there.
No, I guess the only comment would be to Alderman Irvin's point is if it's not acceptable on the rules side, we could always come back and amend the ordinance, but I think we would do it on the front end and work with the comptroller to draft the rules. Thank you.
Alderman Irvin. Point of information, Alderman
Go ahead.
Riley.
Thank you. And I just wanted to, Alderman Thompson basically just said what I was going to say, which is, it's encouraging to hear that the incoming comptroller wants to sit down, either it's briefings or work group, in the promulgation of these rules. But if at the end of the day, we're not satisfied with how that process plays out, we do have the right to come back here and tweak this ordinance. So I'm confident that we can resolve those issues, and that's why I'll be voting to move this out of committee today. But predicated on, we're going to have some conversations before final rules are adopted here. Thank you, Chairman.
Alderman Irvin.
Here's the idea. Why don't we send the rulemaking to the rule committee? The ordinance is going to say one thing. However, at the end of the day, the devil's in the details of how this stuff gets done. And the fact that we, as a body, abdicate rulemaking on ordinances that we pass to the executive branch, I think is something that we need to look at. I would, we have a committee structured that allows for that, and maybe it makes sense for us to be involved in that process at some point. Because again, we can come back and change the ordinance, or we can just deal with it on the front end and set the rules out and have the rules voted upon as many legislative bodies do.
Thank you. Or did you? Alderman Burnett?
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry I wasn't here when we brought up the inline controller. I just wanted to make some comments about her. Of course, I've been knowing her for a long time. I should say namaste to start out, namaste. And she's been behind the scenes, working hard for everyone else. Very humble young lady, very, very intelligent. It's very refreshing to see someone who's, look at her resume. She's been to just about every department, half of the departments in the city, working on their numbers. It's very refreshing to see someone that's homegrown to move up and get a position. And I have confidence that she's going to do a great job. She's always been there for whomever she was working for in the background. She always have been the one to assist, I know myself and other aldermen, when they had questions, sitting right next to whomever was in charge. So I think she's going to do a great job. I commend the mayor on this appointment. It's just fantastic. So I commend it. You're welcome. And I think that I know that there's some questions here about amnesty and some other things. For the most part, a lot of things in this these payment plans, I think, is refreshing for a lot of people in the city of Chicago. A lot of folks are looking for relief. Matter of fact, I was speaking to a guy this morning who had to do something, and he said he couldn't do it because his license was suspended. He couldn't drive, right? And he couldn't do his business. And so trying to figure out ways of trying to give folks an opportunity to be able to do something, extending the payment plans, lowering the fees, all of those things that are specifically giving us a hardship, looking at the hardship part for low-income folks and elderly people, I think is something that's good. Or homeless folks, I think those things help a lot of people. Hopefully people don't take advantage of it, or I shouldn't say take advantage of it, abuse it. Hopefully folks don't abuse it, but to know that we considering those folks that really have a hard time naturally, I think is very important. Of course, all of us, at the end of the day, being on the front end before the budget come out, right, want to know how that's going to balance out with our budget. Hopefully this may encourage more people to make more payments and pay the city back. Hopefully they appreciate this and they want to, pay a little bit. So a little bit is better than nothing, right? And pay a little bit at a time. Hopefully it'll help in the long run. I don't know what you all may have calculated on expectations of what you think we're going to start getting in by doing this. Do you have any ideas of, how people may start stepping up?
Well, we hope that, some of the reforms will actually cost us some money. So we're hoping that the additional payment plan opportunities will make this, in the long run, revenue neutral or even increase revenue. But we will have to have a very strong communication effort so that people do know about these payment plans, because, as you know, the city has had payment plans for some time, and we definitely want to encourage people to take advantage of these options that we're providing.
So, and also I want to ask, and this may have been asked before I got here, with the boots, right? I know, 3 boots? Did we give them more boots? I know you're giving them time to, before, you're giving them 24 hours, right? Have you thought about giving them, like, instead of 3 booths, maybe 5 booths?
You mean tickets?
5 tickets before you get a boot, I'm sorry.
Give them 3 booths.
They shouldn't give them 1 boot, but,
I mean,
that's right.
you know, working with the mayor's office and the Office of Budget and Management, we have looked at various options. And, you know, that is something that, you know, if this body feels that, you know, 5 tickets, it should be 5 tickets, maybe that's something that can happen in the future. This is the first step of the reforms, and so we will continue to look at, you know, the other areas that need to be looked at, such, you know, as booting and impoundment.
So what are you saying? You want us then to do something to say 5 booths?
I think we can look at that with you.
5 tickets, pardon me?
We could look at that with you, and you know, of course, you're going to want to know the revenue implications of something like that. So, you know, we would be able to look at that and help provide you information to make decisions.
Can you look at that? Because you all have been very generous already in giving folks opportunities. I think that may be one that would be helpful to some people.
We can get information to you or meet with you.
All right,
Provide that information.
and I appreciate you too. I think
Thank
you're
you.
doing a good job also in revenue.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. All right, well, I know that there's some questions that my colleagues had, and it sounds like some of them are, you know, are good questions. Of course, I'm concerned about some of those things also, but overall, I think you all have some good incentives in here for the public who needs some help. So thank you all very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Alderman Metz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to say that I'm certainly grateful for the mayor for looking at this program. I had the opportunity last week to have been down there myself with my daughter. Had experienced unemployment, but I wasn't able to pay the tickets. So the mother, you step up and you help them, because she had to get to work. And I had to go get the boot. And I got to pay for the sticker. I had to go through the whole routine. And what I did not see in here, under the amnesty program or hardship, what do we have for unemployment? If a person is unemployed, then they still accumulating the fines and they're going through all of these problems. She was blessed to have a mother to bail out, but everybody ain't always so lucky to come up. So what are we doing to help the least of these then?
So I know that unemployment, you know, if you're unemployed, obviously it's very difficult to make your payments. We are trying.
There's nothing here, and I think that we need to look at hardship as a way of person not being able to do anything, and what release do we as a city look to help provide a way out to help people get stable, or even when they get employed, if they got to go pay all this. Well, I just think it's something we need to look at, and it's really serious for my community, which the unemployment is very high, and if they don't have a driving license and they can't even get to work. So it's really, I would like to sit down at some point too and talk with you about the experience I went through. And I know it got to be a hardship for, I really wasn't aware all of that was taking place, but it was quite a bit of money to have to come up with when you wasn't able, them fees and fines of the devastation we put people through already, and they wasn't even working. And now you got to try to come up with a payment plan for it. It's really devastating. So I would like to talk with you at some point to see how we can help people to be more stabilized and keep their job at the same time.
Yes, of course, Alderman. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Metz. So, Alderman Scott, if you would like to wrap up, and there's just one suggestion. In the testimony, you see that there was the collaborative that was set up, which I think you were part of, but it had several aldermen, the clerk, and I think the comptroller's office, and this might be a good continuance of the collaborative just to do the diligence on the rulemaking and be part of that. So, but go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Exactly what you said. There was a collaborative that was formed, I would say 6 months ago, and it included the clerk who, thank goodness to her, she brought the idea to myself. I know that we had talked about it, Mr. Chair, and said, let's get together, let's form this collaborative. And it included the Heartland Alliance, Kofi, UCAN, Chicago Jobs Council, and Woodstock Institute, and several others about how we can take the onus off of the public as it relates to the debt that is issued by the city for parking fines, fees, and city stickers. And because her office has a lot to do with city stickers, she was very upfront about changing some of the things that happened. And so I'd like to thank her. But once this collaborative came together, we did several meetings out in the community, one being out in North Lawndale. And I remember a conversation with a guy who had got just city sticker tickets, and he had amassed about $5,000 in debt. He was a bus driver for CTA at the time, and because of the loss of his license, was not able to provide for his family. He had 3 children, and they had to go into bankruptcy. And so this ordinance, I think, helps individuals like that. There should be no reason why the city of Chicago is putting folks into bankruptcy because of city debt. I just think that is wrong. And so I think it is very thoughtful for the mayor's office and the administration to come together with all of the stakeholders who were involved in this collaborative and continue this good work. When we were at the press conference at UCAN, like many people talked about and like the revenue talked about, this was just the first step in terms of reform to make our city a more equal city, if you will. Most of the tickets and fines and fees from when the article came out, I think 6 to 8 months ago, was happening on the south and west sides. And we talk about equality, and we talk about making sure that the west and south sides have their share in the piece of the pie that Chicago offers. And this is a small way making folks get a piece of that pie. If you don't have to spend your entire check on these fines and fees, it goes a long way. And the last thing that I'd like to say when we're talking about revenue, we've done studies, and the next largest city, I think, to have done something very similar to this is San Francisco. And what they have found is when they reduce the barrier of entry and they reduce these fines and fees, their revenue has gone up. And so hopefully it won't be a revenue neutral thing. This will be a revenue generator, because people don't want to be, they don't want to walk around with tickets on their back and have this debt as a noose around their neck. They want to pay this debt. They want to get it out. And when we lower these payment plans and we're able to do these things, I think it is good for not only the city, but the residents of the city. And last but not least, I'd like to work with the rules and making sure that we're working with these rules. And I would like a more broader program where we give amnesty across the board and not just for city stickers. I think that, again, the more we're able to put in the pockets of our residents, especially when we're going to them, year after year to ask them to pay more, I think the better we are as a city. So thank you. I want to thank the mayor, thank all the partner organizations, thank the clerk, and thank everybody who will be voting yes for this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Scott. Before we vote, we have public comment, and the first person is Mr. Blakemore.
And you speak on the behalf of your community. Fines, fees, tax, and violations. I just heard the young man just get to speaking. Our leadership, so-called and non-leadership, they can speak with a velvet tongue. Morehouse graduate, these different colleges and universities. Sometimes these black schools have failed too. Miseducation of the black man. You don't have nothing in this black water out in Lawndale. You don't have any black stores. You don't have any economic development. The liquor stores are owned by Arabs and other people. The service stations. Then you come down here. You're disgraceful. You're disgraceful. No economic development. And when that gentleman, one of them, Mr. Irvin, talking about rules. It's rules. Those rules supposed to go to the Rules Committee. And the committee's supposed to have a hearing. And you're supposed to have citizens come out. It's shameful that you don't have any public comment but Mr. Blakemore. Oh, Mr. Blakemore is rampant and raging. Who else is here? Who else is here with this saga that's going on? With this institutional racism that's going on, fines, fees. Don't you know most of these fines are put in these black ghetto neighborhoods? That people are unemployed, unengaged, uninformed. And you come up here from your ward. They don't even vote in these black wards. In your ward, sir, Mr. Michael Scott, low turnout. But you keep getting in. It is something inherently wrong with the system. The non-system, this machine. All of you take a good look at me. I can see. I've been to your ward. I see you have no grocery stores. I can see that your schools was closed up. My schools. I'm black. And I can see you can get some money, you black ones, if you use what you got to get what you want. You pay your race card. And every illegal that's working in the city of Chicago, fine, fee, and tax them. They are going against the law. Every business person up in these white wards that's hiring these people, fine these people, tax these people, demo their cars. You use what you got to get what you want. You know what you got in favor. You still on the same plantation. That's what you got going. Institutional racism.
Thank you, Mr. Blakemore. Next up, we have Ms. Jenna Severson from the Woodstock Institute. And then Mr. Eric Halverson from the Chicago Jobs Council after Ms. Severson.
Good morning. Thank you for convening this and letting us come and testify this morning. Woodstock Institute is a nonprofit research and policy organization that works to make the financial system work for low-income people and people in communities of color. So we are coming today in support of the ordinance 5547. In 2018, Woodstock Institute released a report that was on ticketing disparities in the city of Chicago. I have the report with me. It's available on our website, and it was inspired by the Department of Justice's report on Ferguson, which found that, among other things, municipal fines and fees were a primary driver in the way that they were disproportionately levied on communities of color and increased racial tension and animus between communities of color and the police, and by extension, the local governments. So our report found that in Chicago, which leads the nation in Chapter 13 bankruptcy filings, that because of costly parking ticket and city sticker debt, you're 40% more likely to receive a ticket if you are in a low income or majority minority census tract in the city of Chicago. You're less likely to be able to repay your debt, and you're 2 times more likely to file for bankruptcy than your counterparts in whiter and wealthier parts of the city. So for that reason, we joined with Chicago Jobs Council and some other nonprofits that were advocating at the transit table for some reforms to the vehicle ticketing practices, namely and chief among them being the end of driver's license suspension. One of the things that we looked at was how these punitive policies drive tens of thousands of Chicagoans and people across the state of Illinois into debt, and predominantly those people being people of color. So there was a racial inequity. Our research, and in addition to that, reporting from ProPublica and WBEZ, proves that disproportionate impacts from the city's enforcement practices, including driver's license suspension, made it so that people were unable to not only just get to work, but to be able to repay their debt to the city. We know from our allies across the country who are working on reforms that folks in debt will come into compliance if they're given a reasonable way to do so, and we've seen some attempts at that in other municipalities. So that's why we were thrilled when Clerk Valencia and her team invited us to the Fines Fees Access Collaborative and started to really pay attention to the inequities. We were also thrilled when Mayor Lori Lightfoot and her team joined the collective efforts to reform the vehicle ticketing system. So today, we support this first major legislative effort that will tackle ticketing inequity in the form of Ordinance 5547 and commend the historic effort. We're going to continue to work closely with our partners and ensure that these reforms and any other future reforms do the best at tackling the most egregious harms in the system and allow disinvested communities to thrive. It's our goal that we'll further advocate with the groups for enforcement and...
That's all right. Thank you, Ms. Severson. Next up, Eric Halverson from CJC, Chicago Jobs Council.
Thanks to the chair and thanks to the committee members. My name is Eric Halverson. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm with the Chicago Jobs Council, which represents employment and training service providers in the city and across the region. And I want to come here to ask for the support from every single member of this committee and from the full city council for this ordinance 5547. For years, we have heard from our members about the devastating consequences of suspended driver's licenses and the debts that lead to them. Job seekers miss out on jobs or are arrested trying to drive to work because their license is suspended. Communities, mostly low-income neighborhoods and communities of color, lose out on income and economic activity. Local governments try collecting money from people who don't have it. Law enforcement systems are forced to pay debt collectors and law enforcement are forced to play debt collector and sweep people unnecessarily into the criminal justice system, and businesses miss out on qualified candidates. I applaud Mayor Lightfoot and Clerk Valencia, the supporters of this ordinance, the members of the Fines Fees Access Collaborative, including the Finance Department, as well as the members of our Transit Table Coalition that we convene, including Woodstock Institute and many others. This is a critical step forward. Driver's license suspension has no place in debt collections over non-moving violations. I was just in Washington, D.C. for the launch of a national campaign called the Free to Drive Coalition that is working across the country to eliminate these excessive driver's license suspensions. And when I tell them that in the state of Illinois, we suspend driver's licenses over non-payment of parking tickets, they look at us dumbfounded. We're one of maybe 4 states, upon last count, that suspends licenses for something so minor as parking and compliance tickets. So when should that kick in? The answer is never. It is never an appropriate time to suspend a license for non-payment of parking or compliance tickets. The reform of the payment plans in this ordinance are also critical and really valuable. I talk to people on a regular basis who say that they have gone and tried to pay the money that they have collected. They got $50 together and they offered it, but because it didn't qualify as a payment for the payment plans that exist, the money wasn't accepted, the city never saw it, and the person could not be in compliance. I urge all the aldermen to look at the ticket trap by ProPublica. ProPublica and WBEZ have done phenomenal work looking into the devastation in each one of your wards. And these tickets, they're not for handicapped parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I have a motion for approval for this item by Alderman Scott. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for your testimony. right. Item number 4 on the Finance Committee agenda is a proposed ordinance to amend the program report setting forth terms of the PACE, or Property Assessed Clean Energy Act, to come into compliance with amended Public Act 101-0169, which became effective July 29, 2019. Testimony for this will be provided by Tim Jeffries, the Deputy Commissioner of Department of Planning and Development. And a new dad, congratulations. We're going to have to hear how much sleep you're getting.
It was 9 months, so I'm 9 months ago, so
Yeah,
I'm
I know,
settling in
I know.
nicely. Thank you.
Please say your name and title and give us the background on this program.
Sure.
Thank you,
So,
Tim.
good afternoon, Chairman Wagsback and the members of the Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Tim Jeffries, Deputy Commissioner in the Department of Planning and Development. I'm here today to request your approval of amendment to the existing PACE program ordinance. PACE, or Property Assessed Clean Energy, was originally approved by City Council in October of 2018 and is a financing tool that allows property owners to obtain funding for energy efficiency, resiliency, sustainability, and renewable energy infrastructure building improvements. The cost of this work is then repaid as an assessment on the property tax bill over a term that matches the useful life of the improvements, which often is as long as 20 to 25 years. On July 29, 2019, Governor Pritzker signed an amendment to the PACE Act that made several changes which require the City Council to authorize the corresponding revisions to Chicago's municipal program. Specifically, these major changes include expanding the eligible PACE cost to include resiliency improvements, which includes things like flood mitigation and fire suppression. Also now included as an eligible cost is water use improvements, which includes water efficiency systems, stormwater management, as well as the replacement of lead pipes for water supplies. Finally, it will amend the process by which mortgage holders are notified and consent to the use of PACE on a property. DPD is requesting the consideration of a direct introduction of this item because of the timing considerations for a project in our pipeline. Amped Kitchens, which is located at 5801 West Dickens in the Belmont-Cragen community, is pursuing the use of $4 million in PACE for the $25 million redevelopment of the former 117,000 square foot Zenith Corporation factory as a business incubator and food production startup. The project is already under construction, and the developer has a bridge loan in PACE that anticipates being swapped out for PACE funds before September 30th. Given the changes at the state level, the city currently lacks the authority to execute PACE funding for Amped Kitchens and other projects. This amendment will allow the program to continue to operate and not negatively impact this project already in process. Thank you for your consideration, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Alderman Osterman?
How does the department advertise this to Chicagoans? Not this one specific issue with Amped Kitchen, but everyday homeowners who want to take advantage.
So I guess just one point of clarification. At this time, PACE is only open to industrial, commercial, or multifamily residential buildings. There has been some talk eventually about one day maybe getting into single family, but right now it's not ineligible.
What's the threshold on multifamily?
5 units or more.
Okay.
So we do have a program administrator, Loop Counterpoint is their name. They have a great website. They've held a number of events so far. I've been at a couple, just sort of getting the building industry people involved right now, I think, as the program goes. I mean, Amped Kitchens would be our first project, so we're still very early in the...
Do they have brochures? I've got websites, but if they could reach out to the members of the committee, I think it's an issue that I think moving forward people would be interested in getting more information on. So
absolutely,
happy to support it today, but I think looking forward, and let me ask you about the lead pipes. This new legislation, what they changed in Springfield, would enable developers who are building new or someone who has multifamily or business could replace lead lines in the property, but also potentially lead service lines?
That's correct. It's also rehab of existing buildings as well. So yes, lead pipe replacement is an eligible cost now.
All right. Yeah, if you could get us some information about the program, I think myself and others would want to look at other ways we could use this important program. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Alderman Smith?
Let me ask how this legislation could affect a plan development.
So I think it's a very welcome change that this can include stormwater management, which is a real issue, especially on the Chicago River. So if there was a planned development area that had common open space, could this assessment system be used to help finance stormwater improvements along that, in that common open space? Or, you know, sometimes developers make improvements to public property as part of a planned development. Could that be used for that? Could this be used in that context somehow? Or it's not necessarily on their land, but on adjoining property?
Adjoining property, no. I think that they have to be the property owner. And as far as, you know, if it, like an open space, I think it has to be part of a comprehensive, I would need to look at the law, review this with our law department, see how they interpret it, but it's my understanding that there has to be a sort of a closed system. So if it's just a park for the sake of being a park, that's, you know, more park than stormwater management system, likely not. If it's more stormwater management system than park, then potentially. But again, I'd need to review that with law.
Could we talk about that? Because, and this is an assessment on the property tax bill of the owners of the property.
Correct.
Right, like a condominium specialist. I mean, it's the same concept as a special assessment,
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, I would very much like to talk to you about this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you, Alderman Smith. Alderman Riley?
Thank you.
Do you want me to?
Thank you, Chairman. I also just have a couple of really quick questions. If through the chair you could explain to us how you're publicizing the program. I'll be honest, until about a week ago, I didn't even know it existed. And I know that obviously the recent change by the Pritzker administration has made this suddenly a hot topic, but how many entities are currently in the program in Chicago today? Do you know?
We have 2 projects that are very close to being, closing their deals, and then we have maybe 3 or 4 that are not far behind them, and then beyond that in the pipeline, I'll have to get some information. I can provide it to you through the chair. I mean, it's,
Ballpark, is that pipeline, are we talking dozens? Are we talking hundreds? Do you have a sense of the volume of interest?
I mean, I think if we're talking all stages of interest, it's probably somewhere, it's closer to dozens than hundreds, but again, I think as this program picks up speed, it's only been around for less than a year. Sure. We'll start to see more.
And I just wanted also some clarification. I know that in the description, PACE is available for privately owned commercial, industrial, and residential buildings with 5 or more units. Does that mean then that condominium associations could qualify for this program, or is it meant for residential rental properties only?
There might be a provision that allows.
Sorry,
Let me just
I'm not
confirm
trying
with
to
law.
put you on the spot.
No. I just want to make sure I'm getting it correct.
This is James McDonald, Deputy Corporation Counsel with the Law Department. The special assessment has to be recorded against the property. So we would have to be able to show, I don't think there's an exception for condos, but we can check and get that back through the chair.
Understood. So as it stands today, it's the law department's understanding this really applies to residential rental buildings?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Chairman.
Alderman Cardenas?
Thank you, Chairman. This is great legislation. Now, this looks to be almost TIF eligible just by looking at this project description. Can they get both? So let's say there happen to be some folks interested in along Pershing Road, which is a TIF eligible area. They would request TIF funds, and they could also request PACE funds as well. Am I correct?
They could. It would have to be on, the TIF Act doesn't allow for new construction, so it would have to be on the rehab-only buildings, like Pershing Road would be, obviously. There's nothing in the rules that preclude the use of PACE and TIF together. I think we would look at it on a case-by-case basis. I think the biggest thing is, obviously, if you're using either TIF or PACE dollars for a particular expense. You couldn't double dip and have PACE or TIF apply to that same expense.
Well, they're also, the reason, well, that's a good point, by the way, but the reason I'm all asking as well is because this affects the property tax bill, and the way we fund the TIF is through property taxes.
It actually would not, this is a non-ad valorem special assessment, so it doesn't apply on the bill as it's levied, so the tax bill would be paid in
separate.
full, and then this would come on top of that.
Okay, so
So,
it'd be a separate assessment.
correct, I think it's the intent
Well,
that,
what I'm saying is even from a TIF standpoint, I mean, the TIF, either you get TIF assistance or you get a 6B or a 7C, Class C tax abatement.
sure.
How do you see those two playing out? I mean, one or the other, could they get the 6B and then at the same time apply for your PACE program?
I mean, I think it would just depend on the project. We would look at as we do with all the TIF deals or the Class 7, Class 6Bs, we would look at their numbers and see if there's a demonstration of need. Do these projects need
And how much
the
is in,
incentive?
how much is in your program right now for in this PACE legislation?
We have
For the city?
We have 2 that are very close to being completed, and then we have another 3 that are closer in the pipeline, and as I said, probably somewhere in the neighborhood.
What's your capacity, I guess what I'm asking?
I think the state authorizes up to $2 billion total.
Okay. So it's quite,
It's quite high, yeah.
it's quite, okay, got it. All right, thank you. Now, on the summary of legislation, it says on number 1, revising the program. I'm interested, I chair the committee on environmental protection and energy, and I like to be notified if, and such revisions take place ahead of time.
Sure.
So if you can make that happen, that'd be great, especially when it comes to sustainability, which is something I'm very interested in.
Okay, absolutely.
Okay? In terms of the outreach, my other colleague from the 40th Ward covered it, and I think suffice to say that you got that covered as well. No further questions, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Cardenas.
I'm in support.
Okay. May I have a motion for approval on this item? Oh, wait, pardon me. Alderman Lopez, did you wish to speak?
Oh, motion. Sorry.
Sorry. Okay, moved by Alderman Lopez. All in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. Our next item from the Department of Law is a communication transmitting a list of cases for judgments and settlements entered into for the month of July 2019, which will be placed on file with the clerk. Yeah. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Let's see. Items 6 through 10 are proposed orders for tag day permits and various small claims. Does anyone wish to be heard on these? Yes, Alderman Osterman.
Just a question on condo refuse rebates. If the committee could look at what is outstanding, we ended that program, I think 2 or 3 years ago, but we are slowly paying it off, and I think I'd be curious to know, I'm sure my colleagues would, just what we owe. Don't need it now, but as we get into the budget, it's a question we get periodically.
Ann Emerson with the Committee on Finance. So we actually have those numbers, and I'm happy to put together a memo that I will get out to everyone. One of the main things with closing out the condo rebate program is that we are allotted through the budget so much money every year to push out. So there are some issues with calculations and then actual wrapping up given liquidity. So, but I will have that all put together for you.
Let's just wrap that thing up, pay them off, and move on to other stuff.
We can find a couple tens of millions of dollars to just bang it all out, that'd be great, but we're a little behind on that. So, but I'll get it all out in a memo, and I'm happy to take calls from anyone in the meantime.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Osterman. Did we do let's see, we got to pass all those there. So on items 6 through 10, do I have a motion for approval? One speaker. Is there Mr. Blakemore here? No? Okay. Moved by Alderman Lopez, seconded by Alderman Thompson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the motion carries. We're going to move on to the supplemental agenda. And I think, are they in aviation at the moment? Yeah, I know, but we'll move on there. Okay, we will have Renee Rodney, First Assistant Corporation Counsel, cover the supplemental agenda items. We have 4 proposed orders authorizing the Corporation Counsel to enter into and execute a settlement order for each of the following cases. And she will cover them each one by one, starting with the Dumitrescu case.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Renee Rodney, First Assistant Corporation Counsel. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. I'm here to present 4 settlements for your consideration. One settlement will resolve a lawsuit brought by a bicyclist who was injured due to roadway conditions, and the other 3 are in response to complaints of police misconduct. The first settlement would end a lawsuit brought by Catalin Dumitrescu, PhD, who suffered a traumatic brain injury with permanent life-altering effects and other injuries when he was in a bike accident on the 1500 block of East 56th Street, which had an exposed trolley rail protruding through the asphalt. He claims the city was negligent in failing to remove the rail, failing to resurface the street prior to the accident, and doing uneven and ineffective asphalt patching around the rail. The law department recommends settling this case for $9.5 million, inclusive of all fees and costs. On October 25, 2014, in the early afternoon, 40-year-old Dumitrescu was riding his bicycle eastbound on 56th Street near Harper. This area was designated by the city on its bike map as a bike route. Dumitrescu testified that he heard a car behind him, looked back to see how close it was, and as he was turning back around, his bike tire got caught in the exposed trolley rail, and he was thrown over his handlebars and landed on the roadway. He was found unconscious in the roadway and taken to the emergency room at University of Chicago Hospital. When 56th Street in this location was resurfaced in 1999 or 2000, the abandoned trolley rail from the early 1900s beneath the surface was not removed. A few years later, the rail started protruding through the asphalt. In addition, potholes developed alongside the rails, and though CDOT patched the potholes, the patches did not last. In June of 2014, about 5 months prior to plaintiff's accident, a CDOT crew was sent out, but the foreman of that crew had been trained not to patch over exposed rails, and the rail was left exposed. The alderman had approved resurfacing this location in May of 2014 as part of the MENU program. CDOT scheduled the project in its usual manner, and the resurfacing was done in early November, soon after Dumitrescu's accident. For about 2 years after the accident, due to his traumatic brain injury, Dumitrescu did not remember how the accident occurred. He testified that he regained memory, however, including that his bicycle tire got caught in the rail. While the city retained experts who called into question the regained memory so long after the accident, the judge ruled that without specific evidence of some other cause, the city was barred from suggesting alternate causes of Dumitrescu's accident. Furthermore, plaintiff's medical witnesses provided testimony supporting the plausibility of the regained memory. Plaintiff's civil engineering expert opined that the exposed rail was difficult to see and dangerous in that bicycle tires are apt to get caught in the gap between 2 metal strips, causing a loss of control. He testified that the city should have removed the rail when the street was resurfaced or in earlier decades after trolley cars were no longer in use. He also said that once the rail became exposed and repeated pothole patching was known to be ineffective, the street should have been reconstructed with the rail removed. The city retained its own experts and also alleged that Dumitrescu was negligent in not looking where he was going and in failing to wear a helmet. Dumitrescu countered that it was reasonable for him to turn to see how far back the car was behind him. Dumitrescu brought a pretrial motion to bar evidence that he was not wearing a helmet, which the judge granted. This was in part because the Illinois Supreme Court previously held that evidence of failure to wear a seatbelt is not admissible on the issue of liability or damages and has barred other defendants from arguing that the plaintiff was comparatively negligent for failing to wear a motorcycle helmet. Dumitrescu suffered a traumatic brain injury with skull fractures and bleeding within the brain, as well as clavicle and pelvis fractures. He had an emergency surgery to alleviate pressure on the brain and remained in a coma for about a week. Dumitrescu has a number of permanent conditions from the accident, many of which will worsen over time. First, he has global cognitive deficits, including issues with attention, memory, and executive function. Dumitrescu has a PhD in computer science, and prior to the accident, he worked at Fermilab. Since the accident, he's had difficulty focusing, processing information, and remembering the knowledge he previously had. In addition, Dumitrescu has left side visual field neglect. This means that even though both of his eyes are functioning, his brain does not perceive or consider the left side of his visual field. Cognitively, he will decline at an earlier age and develop early dementia. Dumitrescu also has left-sided hemiplegia or weakness. He can shrug his left shoulder and move his left arm slightly, but he has limited movement in his hand and cannot control the muscles in his hand and fingers. This makes dressing, eating, and using the bathroom difficult. His left leg is spastic and remains straight. He can lift and drag it, and he can walk, but for balance and stability, he needs to walk with a 4-pronged cane. Dumitrescu will need hip and knee replacements arising from the fractures he sustained in the altered gait that resulted. At 46 years old, Dumitrescu has a life expectancy of 33 more years and would be able to claim significant economic damages at trial. He has past medical bills of approximately $1.1 million. In addition, his future life care needs, according to his life care planning expert and economist, are $23.5 million to $28 million. Dumitrescu's past lost income is approximately $435,000, and his future lost income, according to his economist, is $3 million. Dumitrescu would also seek large sums for pain and suffering, loss of a normal life, and disfigurement. Additionally, his wife brings a claim for loss of consortium. The accident happened on a signed bike route, which the court ruled was intended for bicyclists. The rail was exposed for years without roadway patching with roadway patching, but of limited effectiveness. The Dumitrescu family is quite likable and would engender sympathies of a jury. While they might find Dumitrescu negligent for not paying better attention, there remains a substantial likelihood that it would award a very large sum to him and his wife. Dumitrescu and his wife demanded $38 million to settle their claims. The proposed settlement of $9.5 million, inclusive of fees and costs, is a cost-effective measure to limit the city's financial exposure. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Rodney. Alderman Osterman, you have a question?
Yeah. Terrible accident. The question's kind of moving forward, and I guess we as a city over the last 10 years have rapidly expanded bike routes. And my question is, I guess, how does the law department work with Department of Transportation to make sure that we're maintaining those in such a way that we're not going to have more situations either like this or legally we're not liable? So is there coordination with the law department and Department of Transportation on making sure that our bike routes, the potholes are getting filled, the signage is where it needs to be, things like that?
In this particular instance, the bike route where the accident occurred has been removed from the city map identifying it as a bike route. The law department has been in touch with CDOT throughout the litigation. It's my understanding that the mayor's office has encouraged CDOT to identify all of the exposed railways or abandoned railways throughout the city and assess the hazards. So that is the plan going forward.
So we have an acting commissioner of Department of Transportation who's an outstanding guy. My point is that the bike program is rapidly building miles and miles and miles around the city for bike routes that we're telling people are safe. The weather conditions and the way our streets hold up in Chicago doesn't conform with safe bike riding all the time. So I'm asking you, following this meeting, to get with the Department of Transportation and use the fall to do an assessment on where we are, so that, this is a tragic situation for $9.5 million and affecting someone's life, but there are people that get injured on bikes every single day in the city, and we have to have a system in place that makes sure that those, the bike lanes are well maintained. The only other question I have is that this individual did not have a bike helmet on. And I guess the other question I would ask you to take back to the law department is, if the city required cyclists to wear helmets, legally, would that put us in a different situation with cases like this and future cases?
Yes, we have looked into that. First, we would have home rule authority to mandate helmet for bikers. Right now, there is no rule requiring that. Just do want to make sure I'm expressing this point properly as to what the result would be.
I think
So-
we could, do you want us to
Yeah,
have that sent through the chair? Or do you you have the answer?
Sure. One way that we could limit our exposure is to limit the number and locations of bicycle facilities where we intend for bicyclists to use. We're only liable for injuries to, quote, intended and permitted users of the city's properties. But if we made that change, bicyclists would still be permitted to ride in all the locations where they currently can. So.
No, I know, cyclists I guess the question relates more to the helmet. And if we required as a city to require cyclists over 18 to wear helmets, where does that put us in a legal standing? And I think, I don't want you to pontificate, or I want you to take it back and research it, and if you can get it to the chair, get it to me, I'd be curious on that moving forward. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's some remarkably strong parallels between this case and another well-known case involving a cyclist in DuPage County who was injured under similar circumstances. That case went to trial, in fact, was argued before the Supreme Court, Baub versus the Township of Wayne. And it raised all sorts of issues about a municipality's obligation for intended users of bike trails and other things. Did you look at the ramifications of that case in making the decision on this to settle?
I don't know if that particular case was ruled on, but was researched. We would have made the argument that he contributed to his injuries by failing to wear a helmet, but the plaintiff filed a motion barring us from doing so, and the judge granted that motion. So were this to proceed to trial, we could not have made that argument. I personally am not familiar with that case, but I can bring it to the attention of the trial team.
Baub, B-O-U-B, versus the Township of Wayne, which is a DuPage County township. Yeah, I mean, there's ramifications going forward, and Alderman Usman touched on it. When we designate bike trails, when the city says this is for you, cyclists, there's an implied obligation on our behalf to maintain it and to make sure it's safe. And whether or not the cyclist is wearing a helmet is largely irrelevant to that question. The obligation and the burden is on us as a city in making those determinations. And as I said, this went all the way to the Supreme Court. It continues to be a controversial decision because municipalities often try to get around the burden created by the maintenance requirements by saying that certain areas are not intended for cyclists. They lack the official imprimatur of, being okay for cyclists. So that sort of gets us as a city off the hook when injuries like this occur. So this raises a lot of complicated issues for a cyclist-friendly city like Chicago. So I would hope that the lawyers who worked on this particular case, and I support the settlement, by the way, it seems reasonable for a very tragic accident. But I would hope that the lawyers who worked on this would take a look at that Supreme Court decision and how it might affect our policy going forward as we continue to expand our cyclist network, we continue to build protected bike lanes and designate greenways, and basically, state that more of Chicago's public way is welcome to cyclists who are in fact officially designated intended users of the public way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Hopkins. Any other, Alderman Hairston?
Thank you. I cannot stress enough the importance of coordinating with the Department of Transportation. They are still not doing what they should do. There's still cobblestone streets that have been repaved or patched, and they have not gone in because it's cheaper for them not to. And I think we need to stress to them that it is important that they do the necessary work so that people do not get injured because they've done stuff on the cheap. I'm very familiar with that location. It is an access point. It is an access point to Jackson Park. It is an access point to the lakefront. Whether it's a designated bike lane or bike area or not, people have used it for decades because it is the only way to have access to the lakefront, because in that particular area, there are metro tracks that are above the street level. So you only have access through a few viaducts, 59th Street, 57th Street, 56th Street, 55th Street, 53rd Street, 47th Street. Those are the only options to get to the lakefront, just west of the metro tracks. And so a lot of the bike routes need to be evaluated, not just from an engineering perspective, but from a legal perspective, because you have bike lanes right next to where people open their car doors when they park. You've got the lane bump outs that have no safety paint that is visible in a snowstorm or during the summer or when there's fog. So there are a lot of measures, and I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago with the Department of Transportation. And so we are still liable because we refuse to take action to correct when necessary. And so I hope that you can stress this.
I
That's
will.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Hairston. May I have a motion for approval on Dimitrescu order? Alderman Thompson. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the motion carries. You ready for basketball? Okay. All right. Item B is Baskins versus Gilmore, Jarocki, Kelly, and the City of Chicago.
This second proposed settlement would bring an end to a lawsuit brought by Joseph Baskins, who alleges that he was assaulted and injured by 3 plainclothes police officers during a physical fight in a parking garage in the Loop. Baskins also makes various claims against the city, alleging that the incident in question was the result of widespread practices, including a code of silence and failure to adequately discipline officers. The city identifies several risks in this case, and the Department of Law seeks to settle this case for $450,000, inclusive of all fees and costs. I'm happy to take any questions.
No questions. Oh, wait, Alderman Lopez, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. And I would like to thank you for the briefings on this. This is one of a number that are if I remember correctly, are personally insulting to me. These three individuals, even though the description was rather brief on this one, these were the three officers that were already on leave, if I'm correct, because they were involved with a different case.
On the day of the incident, the officers were meeting with the Corporation Counsel in preparation for a trial in another alleged police misconduct case. They were still on active duty at the time.
So they were still on, right, so they were on active duty, forgive me, already meeting with the Corporation Counsel regarding another complaint against all three of them, for which we're going to have to pay at some point as well, and decided on a liquid lunch that they would go and allegedly attack someone in a parking lot, correct? In rough terms? That's what, allegedly?
Right. There was evidence that after they left Corporation Counsel's office, the three officers went to a local restaurant and consumed at least 8 beers and 6 vodka drinks. It is the officer's position that they were attacked by the plaintiff and his group of friends. It is the plaintiff's position that the officers made racial slurs and picked a fight with him and then physically attacked him without provocation. The plaintiff says he defended himself, and the officer pulled out his gun and pointed it at Baskins. Baskins took the officer's gun, and he and his friends fled the garage. The gun was later recovered by other police.
So, I mean, for me, it just is remarkable. And I have sat here, whether on this committee or on the floor of the council when I wasn't on this committee, opposing lawsuits when I find that it's just the behavior is just reprehensible, whether it was citizen or whether it was employee. And this is one of those examples where it's like you almost have to add, this just proves you can't fix stupid sometimes. Because they are quite literally costing us already $250,000, Chairman, and now we have to pay this because they obviously have never learned. And they remained officers on the force, and I know there's some technicalities and circumstances why some of them are still there, but for me it is just unacceptable and inexcusable behavior that we have to pay for yet again, especially at a time when they're already being investigated for a different issue. And I think this will lead us, or should lead us, into a conversation with regards to the department and its officers on how they are conducting themselves, moving, as this contract comes forward or otherwise, because this is just not behavior we can tolerate. It shows that that certain officers prone to this stupidity do not learn, do not get fired, and the taxpayers once again are on the hook, this time for $450,000 for their own stupidity. I just can't support this, and it's mind-boggling to me that we are asked to do this while they are simultaneously still under investigation for a different allegation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman King?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just some points of information. What would our exposure be if we didn't settle? What was the original?
For the Baskins case?
Yes.
Well, their initial demand was $950,000. We have reached a settlement in principle of $450,000. As far as where the case is now, while it has been pending for 2 years, the city did not yet engage in the litigation that would be involved in defending the claims against the city, alleging this widespread pattern and practice of failure to discipline. That we would incur possibly additional fees in defending that. It would require several depositions of high-ranging officials in law enforcement, in the city government, and we'd be exposed to a guilty finding by a jury, and if we lost a trial, we would be responsible for plaintiff's attorney's fees. So I do not have a number precisely, but the fees could have certainly exceeded the settlement just based on litigation costs alone, separate and apart from exposure from an adverse jury verdict.
Right. And the other point of information, much to my colleagues' suggestion, what are the CRs for each of those officers?
Yes. At the time of the underlying incident in 2014, none of the officers had a sustained complaint on their record, but each had a CR history, including 40 complaints for the officer who got into the fight, and 31 complaints and 20 complaints, respectively, for officers 2 and 3. The officer who got into the fight, his complaint history includes allegations of profanity, racial slurs, and improper conduct and force during the course of making arrests. This officer was also under investigation and facing a lengthy suspension at the time of the incident in this case for a complaint involving improper procedures and documentation of an arrest in which the individual escaped custody. The discipline, which called for a 60-day suspension, was not finalized until after the altercation in this case, and that officer was already on discipline as a result of the head injury he suffered from the altercation. Another officer's complaint history involves allegations of improper searches and use of force during an arrest, and the third officer's complaint history involves allegations regarding improper use of force in effectuating arrests, improper searches, and the use of racial slurs.
So there's definitely a pattern, or a suggested pattern in each of those, and I think, as a city, we need to, and perhaps as a department, they need to start looking at those patterns because in most of these cases that we hear, there is a pattern, there's a suggested pattern, and I think, our exposure as a city, as you know, with all of these settlements, is huge, but we need to start looking at the patterns that are created well in advance of these settlements. And the department needs to think about, how we can mitigate that by disciplining these officers who seem to have a pattern of CR histories, albeit none of them sustained, it seems, but certainly paints a picture that suggests that we need to look at and so that we can lower our exposure as a city, but more importantly, start, making sure that officers are being held to the standard that they should be.
Yes, and just to clarify, I noted that the lead officer was on disability. He is still on disability. The second and third officers were reassigned to the 311 center, where they answer calls from people who dial that number, take their information, and determine what response is needed from CPD. And of those 2 officers, one of them is currently on military leave and not expected to return until the summer of 2020. So he's not currently working with CPD due to his military leave.
But the other 2 are, and will get benefits and retire and all of that.
Right. And there is a pending Bureau of Internal Affairs investigation that has not yet concluded into the altercation underlying this lawsuit.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman King. Before we have a vote, we had one person signed up, Mr. Blakemore. No, Mr. Blakemore. May I have a motion for approval? Alderman Boyris. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Alderman Lopez. In the opinion of the chair, is with the exception of Alderman Lopez, the ayes have it. Motion carries. Our next case is Jared Horton versus City of Chicago and Officers Walker and Moore, Chicago Housing Authority, Russell and Company, and Maverick Security in the amount of $700,000. Ms. Rodney will give you the facts on that case as well.
This third proposed settlement would resolve a lawsuit brought by the family of Marlon Horton, who was shot and killed by a Chicago police officer working as a security guard on the premises of the CHA-owned Henry Horner Homes at 1815 West Monroe in Chicago. Although the officer was working his second job as a security guard for Maverick Security, he announced he was a Chicago police officer, and this was sufficient to trigger the city's obligation to indemnify the officer, who was then acting within the scope of his employment as a police officer for the city. We are proposing to settle this case for $700,000, inclusive of all fees and costs. I'm happy to answer any questions about Horton.
Does anyone have any questions? Alderman Lopez.
Sorry, Chairman, not a question, just a statement.
Don't worry about it.
It's just, again, it bothers me, as I mentioned previously, that officers are able to, outside employment does not bother me for officers, but it's when we're on the hook for what they're doing while moonlighting off duty that bothers me. And now, even though he was working for CHA, the city of Chicago is the one that has to pay the bills for this, is very troublesome. And whether it's by ordinance, by contract, or whatnot, this is definitely something that I think we need to start taking a deeper look at, because it's simply not fair to the Chicago taxpayers to have to pay for his activities on his second job. And I will not be supporting this one either. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Any other alderman wish to speak on it? All right. May I have a motion for approval on? Alderman Osterman moves to pass. All in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Alderman Lopez. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the motion carries. On D, yes. Our final case is, let's see, we had a Scrivener's error here on D. Jermaire versus City of Chicago, Jermaire White versus City of Chicago, and we had Jermaine, it should be Jermarie, and it will be, in the reporting out, it will be addressed with the correct spelling, and Ms. Rodney will give us the background on that.
Sure. Thank you. The fourth and final proposed settlement would resolve a suit brought by Jermarie White, who claims he sustained injuries after being shot by a Chicago police officer during a foot chase. Again, there are several risks in this case, including inconsistent statements by the officer. White filed suit against the officer and the city, alleging claims of excessive force and battery. The city recommends settling this case for $300,000, inclusive of all fees and costs.
Any questions from the alderman? Alderman Sposato.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Radney, for coming out again. Appreciate you. Just a quick question, because this was one that I had a problem with. What was the ask on this one again? And I hate to ask you to repeat, because I already know I was in on the briefing, so can we give me like the short version of exactly what happened again and the amount of the ask?
Sure. The plaintiff's initial demand was $850,000. We were able to come to an agreement in principle to settle the case for $300,000. The case arose when Chicago police officers reported smelling an odor of burnt cannabis from a Dodge Magnum in front of them in traffic. The officers activated their lights, curbed the vehicle. The officers were in an unmarked vehicle and were wearing civilian clothes under police vests at the time. They did not have body-worn cameras because they were assigned to the gang enforcement unit. One of the officers approached the driver's side of the vehicle, and the other officer approached the passenger side. There were 5 occupants in the vehicle.
You know what?
Okay.
That's enough now I remember, so
Okay.
thank you. I couldn't recall it, but thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Sposato.
Won't be able to support this one, so if you can count me as a no, I appreciate it.
I will. Alderman Lopez.
Thank you, Chairman. This is actually one of those lawsuits that I think the police officers were right, and if the individual had not decided to turn and run when he was told not to, things would have turned out differently. As we've seen with some of these other lawsuits in the past, failure to comply leads to unfortunate situations, and this was one of them, but I don't think this is necessarily something that we should be supportive, or my residents would support me in voting in favor of, so I will be voting a no on this one as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. May I have a motion for approval on White versus City of Chicago? Moved by Alderman Hopkins. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. This concludes the cases. Yeah, I have recorded as no's Alderman Sposato, Lopez, and Thompson. And Alderman Hopkins?
Briefly, on an unrelated matter, Ms. Rodney, just congratulations to you and your department. You had a good day today. And I wanted to pass that on to the lawyers at the Department of Law. The judge dismissed the lawsuit against Lincoln Yards with prejudice just a few minutes ago. So good work, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Hopkins. Any other, there's no other, seeing that there's no other business, this concludes the meeting of the City Council Committee on Finance. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.